Chapter 906. Well, Robbins, you have a good eye. After buying a lot of things, Jianghu sat in the car and looked at Robbins Garcia beside him. He couldn't help but smile. Robbins Garcia's face turned red when he heard Jianghu's words. Cough, B-boss, it's not what you think. Robbins Garcia stammered. His eyes were obviously filled with panic and avoidance. Looking at him, Jianghu also smiled. Since you've taken a fancy to her, then be bold and go after her. Your current income is much higher than any white-collar or gold-collar worker. Your annual income is more than $1 million, and it will only be higher next year. What do you have to worry about? Looking at Robbins Garcia in front of him, Jianghu patted him on the shoulder and said with a smile. Hearing Jianghu's words, Robbins Garcia seemed to have gained confidence. He grinned and didn't refute this time. It seems that courage and money are directly proportional to a person's courage. As the saying went, with food in the pocket, there was no need to panic. Now was not the time to store food, but having cash in the pocket was the most important thing. The three of them smiled as they returned home. Then, they each took their own things and made an appointment. After lunch, they would go to the forest to cut down trees. As for the turkey, they would kill it the day before or the day of Christmas. Perhaps because there were no natural enemies, the largest carnivore in the entire forest was the mountain lion. The mountain lion was also called the American golden cat. Although Jianghu's mountain lion was now much bigger than before, at least twice as big, it was still a mountain lion and not some extinct North American lion. Although the mountain lion was called a lion, its temperament was different. Instead, it was more like a tiger. This kind of animal did not live in groups and was basically in the wild. In a year, there were only 2 weeks of estrus when they would pair up. For the rest of the time, they would go their separate ways. As for this North American lion-like lion, after giving birth to a cub, for some reason, it did not leave this place last year or was pregnant. Instead, after the cub grew up, it was chased out of its territory and stayed in the forest. It was the only one there, eating big meals every day. How much could it eat? Although the wild turkey was not as big as the domesticated turkey, it was still at least 15 kilograms. Moreover, it only laid eggs once a month. Each time, it laid 8 to 15 eggs and incubated for 28 days. After the chicks were born, it could continue to lay eggs. The most important thing was that turkeys were very powerful. They could reproduce asexually. After the hen laid eggs, the rooster wouldn't pick the eggs. The rooster could also hatch the chicks. However, the chicks that were born were all female. Even so, this was still very powerful. This made Jianghu feel like he was in a country of women. In Jianghu's forest, there were about 200 wild turkeys. After all, this forest was not small. Now, according to Robbins Garcia's estimate, there were more than 500 turkeys in this forest. This was because there were only 3 animals in the forest that could threaten the adult turkeys: the mountain lion, the python, and the crocodile. The crocodile and the python were cold-blooded animals. It was good enough to eat one a week. Moreover, they were in a state of hibernation for half a year. Even if the mountain lion ate one a day, it would only eat 365 turkeys a year. Not to mention, it couldn't eat one a day. How could it finish a turkey that weighed 15 kilograms in a day? According to the calculations, there were 100 pairs of turkeys here and 10 eggs laid. In a month, 1,000 turkeys would be hatched. That would be 12,000 turkeys a year. It really couldn't be finished. Fortunately, although there was no threat to the adult turkeys, there were still many animals that ate eggs and chicks. Therefore, there was no need to worry about catching turkeys. They could catch them on the same day. After entering the forest, they could catch them in less than half an hour. Carrying a few big bags, Jianghu returned home. Qi Jia and the others had been waiting here for a long time. Seeing Jianghu bring the things back, they happily studied them together. They sorted these things and put them away, waiting for Jianghu's Christmas tree. After lunch, at about 2:00 in the afternoon, Jianghu, Robbins Garcia, and Philemon Turner got together again. Driving the F-750 and pulling a flatbed behind, Jianghu and the others walked towards the forest. After all, the Christmas tree was just a symbol. You couldn't really cut down a particularly big tree, so basically, the trees that everyone cut down were about the same, about 2 meters tall. After all, the frame of the house was placed there, so it couldn't be used as a ceiling, right? After looking around, Jianghu still had a lot of trees that were more than 2 meters tall. These trees were planted more than 10 years ago. No one had taken care of them, but they still maintained the best ecological condition. Pine trees could grow between 80 to 130 centimeters a year. After the pine seeds fell in winter, they would be taken away and eaten by birds, squirrels, and the like. Some that were left behind would grow into new pine trees. In the 3 years that Jianghu had been here, although he didn't deliberately add spiritual energy to the forest, some of it would slowly permeate through the soil. Basically, the annual pine trees here could grow to about 150 centimeters. If this was discovered by scientists, it would be a big deal. Unfortunately, this manor was full of uncouth people, and no one would care. It was like an ordinary family raising a dog. Other people's dogs could grow to 30 centimeters in a year, but your family's dog grew to 35 centimeters. Who would care? It wasn't ready to be sold, and it couldn't be sold when it grew up. Therefore, the pine trees that Jianghu and the others chose were those that were born 2 years ago. In this forest, there were at least 800 if not 1,000 pine trees that grew in these 2 years. It was easy to choose. Not far away, Jianghu and the others picked a few pine trees. Because there were many people here for Christmas this year, everyone had one. Jianghu was not stingy with these things. It was very fast to cut down the pine trees with a chainsaw. After Jianghu and the others cut down these trees, they directly put them on the flatbed cart. After tying them up, they pulled them back to their respective homes. A Christmas tree could not be brought home to be used after the tree was cut down. There were still many steps to be taken. First, they had to get rid of the insects. Then, they had to install a base and remove the excess branches and leaves, leaving only the trunk and branches that looked like umbrellas. This needed to be done slowly. Jianghu had been doing it for 2 years, and this was his 3rd year. Although he wasn't a veteran, the steps were still fresh in his memory. After he came back, he started to do it with everyone. There was still some time before Christmas Eve, so it didn't matter. There was no hurry. Jianghu and the others could do it slowly. So shortly after dinner, Jianghu went back to rest. He still hadn't paid off his debt. Today, it was Aphrodite, Dana, Hilda, and Paige. Tomorrow, it was Sheila, Asheria, Bridget, and Janice. Then the day after tomorrow, he would return to his original state. At least Jianghu wouldn't feel lonely and cold in the middle of the night, right? After 2 days of rest, Jianghu went to Boston. As Moses Adams would be back later than them, he was also expanding his business in Los Angeles. After he came back, Jianghu took Leslie Carter, Wallace Shelley, Beliak, Valentina, Galena, Elisera, Azalina, and Dunan's letter of entrustment to his Ting Loan Company. Each of them transferred 5% of the shares, which was what Jianghu had promised them. But then they gave up the voting rights of these shares. They only participated in the dividends, so this company was still Jianghu's. Then Jianghu asked Jing Jin to help prepare the supplies. Jianghu had already told Taraga about the treasure. Taraga also called the old patriarch who was still in the stockade because he was afraid that the satellite phone would be monitored. So she just said that Jianghu had recently made some money, so he wanted to buy things for the village. He just needed to tell her what the village needed. After the old patriarch heard this, he was very pleased. It seemed that he had made the right choice. Then he explained to Taraga what the village needed now. After Jianghu took the list, he also understood that the things on it should be what the village needed. For example, a variety of clothes, a large number of clothes, not only for summer, but also for winter. There was also coal, seasonings, especially salt, medicine, wound medicine, cold medicine, and so on. They also needed some pots, spatulas, and so on. Living deep in the mountains was not as easy as one imagined. Although it was just some miscellaneous things, Jianghu could see the difficulties of the tribe's survival, so he directly agreed to the old patriarch's request without hesitation. There was no problem with these things. But it was already winter, after all. If they wanted to send it over, they could not send too many directly by helicopter. But if they walked in the forest, the mountain was blocked by the heavy snow, so Jianghu prepared $2 million of supplies and sent them over first. The rest would wait until spring came. The old patriarch was very happy about this. Today, Jianghu came over to discuss the situation of the supplies with Zheng Jin. For an ordinary person, suddenly spending $2 million to buy oil, salt, clothes, and so on would more or less attract some attention. But when the Tinglong Company came forward to buy it, there was no problem in this regard. Before the festival, Jianghu, Belle, Marlon Rupert, and Taraga, who wanted to go home to take a look, sat together in Jianghu's helicopter to deliver the first batch of goods. After arriving at the tribe, the people in the tribe were very excited about the things that Jianghu sent over. Looking at Taraga's outsider appearance, the girls were also very envious, but there was nothing they could do. When the patriarch taught them English, only Taraga learned it. So now they could only watch. Chapter 907. In this world, the most inadvertent thing that passed by was time. Jianghu was not reminiscing about anything, but he really felt that time passed by very quickly. When a person really enjoyed his current life, time was not a slow thing for him. Jianghu was now enjoying this kind of life. When he had nothing to do, he was really bored to death. But when he was idle, he would be lazy. He would play games, go to the manor to look at the horses, play with the dogs, watch TV, and the day would pass. At night, he would not be bored, lonely, or cold. This was because the girls would find ways to play with Jianghu. Living in such a world, Jianghu could be described as drunk and dreamy. It was not an exaggeration at all, and he really enjoyed this kind of life. People's life was nothing more than eating, drinking, and having fun. Some people might say that Jianghu did not have any pursuits, but if you pursued it for a long time, all you got in the end was time to eat, drink, and have fun, right? Jianghu could be said to be eating the best in the world. His beef, his fish, and shrimp, everyone knew how much it cost. He also drank his favorite wine, which could win the gold medal internationally. He liked to drink fruit juices and drinks. What was there to be dissatisfied with? What he played was what he liked the most. Games, cars, horses, dogs, eagles. He could play with anything he wanted. Even if he played with women, he had 10 or 20 of them for him to play with. He wouldn't trade them even if he was given an emperor. Finally, it was fun. He had the first 3 things. If he was not good enough, then he was asking for a beating. Jianghu was not the type to ask for a beating, so he was very happy and satisfied. It was really cool to feel like the world was the same. Under such days, the cold winter in the north did not seem so unbearable. Of course, this was only limited to Jianghu. The others still had to work, right? Time passed quickly. In the blink of an eye, it was December 24th, the eve of Christmas, also known as Christmas Eve. Jianghu had already explained the reason when he first came to Winthrop, so there was no need for him to explain it here. Today was also the first day of the holiday. It was just like the Spring Festival in China. However, in the United States, the highways and the country had always been free. Moreover, Americans were not willing to take the train. They all took the plane. Their plane tickets were also cheap. Early this morning, almost everyone in the manor was on the move to prepare for tonight's Christmas Eve celebration. The families who were going to spend Christmas here were all preparing for tomorrow's Christmas. And those who were preparing to go back tomorrow were also preparing Christmas gifts. After all, they couldn't go back empty-handed. The most important thing was that Americans couldn't give money. If they gave money directly, it would be like slapping someone in the face. They had to give a gift. No matter how much the gift was worth, it was still a token of their sincerity. In China, people had always said that Americans were capitalist and cold-blooded. However, from this point alone, Americans were much more particular in this aspect compared to China. Jianghu and the others also began to get busy early in the morning. Because tonight's celebration was held in Jianghu's house. There was no reason for it, because it was like this every year. Of course, those people were also very particular. They wouldn't make too much of a mess in Jianghu's house. However, as the boss, Jianghu naturally had to prepare food and other things. Naturally, Christmas was indispensable. 2 wild turkeys were hunted by Jianghu yesterday. This morning, Chia was busy putting honey on them and roasting them. A good turkey wasn't easy to roast. In addition to the turkey, other things were naturally not lacking. Milk mashed potatoes, Christmas protein biscuits, Christmas pudding, these were indispensable. Jianghu's house naturally didn't lack the main dish. The best part of the cattle that was slaughtered yesterday was used to make tonight's dinner. After going out to sea last night, the seafood was delivered early this morning. The delicacies in Jianghu's house could be described as crazy today. Because it was really crazy. There were Chinese, Western, and French dishes. The food in Jianghu's house was really only imaginable. There was nothing that couldn't be done. There were 5 beef dishes: red wine stewed beef produced in the manner, pan-fried steak, Chinese Xiran beef, roasted beef rolls with enoki mushrooms, and fried beef minced with seafood soup. The taste was quite good. There were even more seafood dishes, such as pan-fried salmon, grilled salmon, stewed haddock, steamed bay scallops with vermicelli and garlic paste on top. This dish was quite popular in the country. Lobsters were roasted and boiled, steamed dragon dumplings, boiled spotted shrimp, braised prawns made from spotted shrimp, steamed king crab, and pork dishes made from the fragrant pig in Jianghu's manner. The most indispensable dish was Jianghu's favorite, double-fried pork. 9 caddies of yellow chicken were also slaughtered, chicken wings left over from the past, cola chicken wings, kung pao chicken, chicken drumsticks, and other things were directly fried and eaten. Americans like to eat this dish the most. There were also a lot of vegetables in Jianghu's greenhouse. There were cold dishes, salads, and a plate of cucumbers. The only food that wasn't used was probably the German donkey. This was also because Americans didn't eat horses and donkeys. The donkey was killed in Jianghu and the others would eat it tomorrow. But even if there was no donkey meat, Jianghu's dinner was sumptuous enough. At noon, the 2 sons of the Philip family also came back, Louis Turner and John Turner. The 2 of them were travel-worn. After they came back, they naturally came over to say hello to Jianghu. Jianghu also asked them to come together in the evening, and then they went home to rest. Philip's eldest son, Louis Turner, was still working as a basketball assistant in a high school. This was a very stable job. For a black man to have a stable job, and he didn't have a high degree of education, this was not easy, so Philip Turner was very pleased. On the contrary, his youngest son was going to graduate this year, but he still didn't know what he would do after graduation. According to him, he wanted to go to Los Angeles or New York to make a living in the big cities. Although the Philemon family supported him, they were inevitably worried. Compared to going out to make a living, they preferred to have a stable job. In fact, the same was true of the Chinese. Then, in the afternoon, came Penelope Dollar, who had come once the previous year, but had left on the afternoon of Christmas Day, because, after all, she had to spend it with her mother, but this year she had heard the taciturn Burke Dollar say something. This year, his daughter was going to leave on the 31st. She was only going back to celebrate the new year. She was going to stay in the manor for nearly a week. This made him very happy, because it seemed that he had not spent so much time with his daughter since she was 5 or 6 years old. There was no other way. He and his wife had the opposite idea. He would rather suffer hardships than go to the big city and look for the colorful world. His wife, on the other hand, yearned for those big cities and did not like to live too comfortably in the countryside. She was a woman who pursued modernity and vanity, which Burke Dollar couldn't give her. But when Penelope came, she didn't come to Jianghu. Thinking about it, she didn't have a good impression of Jianghu. In this way, under the busy atmosphere, the sun gradually set. At about 5:00 in the evening, all of Jianghu's men came to Jianghu's villa with their families. Because there were too many people, it was impossible to just sit there and eat. So every year, Jianghu made it look like a buffet. They could eat whatever they wanted. The delicious food was piled up like a small mountain. Anyway, they were on the same side, so there was no need to be polite. If these cowboys and fishermen made it look like a high-end restaurant, they might not be able to eat. When everyone arrived, the banquet began under Jianghu's command. Following that, the atmosphere of the entire banquet almost instantly reached a climax. Everyone took their favorite food and stuffed it into their mouths. Although they didn't speak much, it was obvious that everyone was very satisfied and happy. Thinking of the activities after the meal, their hearts were surging. One must know that now was the time to reap the rewards. Jianghu, the host, naturally greeted everyone while stuffing food into his mouth. He wouldn't mistreat his stomach. For a moment, it was not bad to describe the situation in front of him with words like eating and drinking well. About an hour later, when everyone was almost done eating, Jianghu walked to the middle of the hall. Gently clapping his hands, the eyes of everyone who had been paying attention to Jianghu gathered on Jianghu. Seeing everyone looking over, Jianghu clapped his hands with a smile and shouted loudly, "After this year, another year has passed. I am very grateful for everyone's contribution to my manor. Of course, there will be a reward for your efforts. This is the truth of God. Just like the seeds planted in spring, they will be reaped in autumn. Now, let's see how you reap the rewards." Hearing Jianghu's words, everyone cheered at once. Just like Jianghu said, it was time for them to discuss the harvest. Then Jianghu took out a piece of paper in front of everyone and waved it in front of everyone. "Let me explain. This is our manor's sales of beef cattle this year. Up to yesterday, we have sold a total of 16,121 beef cattle, with an average price of $160,320. That's $6,300 for $2.5 billion. Hearing Jianghu's words, everyone in the room looked at the paper in Jianghu's hand enthusiastically, especially the cowboys. This was all money. Chapter 908. Looking at the slightly fanatical gazes of these cowboys, Jianghu also smiled proudly. To be honest, if it was 3 years ago, he would never have thought of this kind of money. But now, he had the ability to create this kind of wealth. According to what we've said before, we'll take out 2/1000 of the total as a reward, so this year's bonus will be $5,168,392.6. I'll make it up to a total of $5.17 million. I have to clarify that Gladstone Nelson, Black Hill, and Edie Lewis joined our big family later, so this year, I've only prepared a year-end bonus for you. You won't get a share of the bonus, but don't be discouraged, because next year, we'll have a total of 40,000 cows, 30,000 of which will be sold. According to this year's standards, next year's income will be $4.8 billion, and the year-end bonus will be about $9.6 million. When the time comes and you split it, it will only be more than this year, not less than this year." Hearing Jianghu's words, the people below became fanatical in an instant, but 3 people in the crowd were a little embarrassed. They were the 3 newcomers that Jianghu mentioned, because they knew that the money had nothing to do with them. But as Jianghu's voice fell, they were full of hope again. Next year, they could also get a bonus of more than 1 million. That was more than 1 million. 17 million. Robbins Garcia, Burke Dahl, Philemon Turner, Harriman Fells, and Bell Lester will be divided equally between 5 people, 1,034,000 each. I don't care what you do with this money, but you have to pay your own taxes next year. As Jianghu spoke, he smiled and took out 5 Citibank checks from his pocket and put them in front of him. Robbins Garcia and the others naturally understood what Jianghu meant. They walked over with a smile, picked up the checks in front of them, and stuffed them into their arms after glancing at them. If it weren't for their ears, they might have grinned. Penelope, who was sipping red wine in the distance, and the Turner brothers sitting in the distance were a little confused at this time. At the same time, their eyes were shining. Penelope had long known that Jianghu was not a stingy person to his own people. This could be seen from Jianghu's attitude towards Moses Adams. Jianghu had almost never made Moses Adams uncomfortable because of money. He had always made people grateful and work for him wholeheartedly, and now it seemed to be the same. It seems that it is really a blessing for father to work under him. It's just that this boss is too lecherous. Looking at the high-spirited Jianghu, Penelope thought in her heart after taking a sip of red wine. Well, I still have to rely on you guys next year. Next, it's about the dividends from the fishery. Seeing everyone return to the crowd after thanking him, Jianghu took out a note from his pocket. It recorded the harvest of this year's fishery. This year, not only did we have beef for sale in our manor, but we also had a bumper harvest in our fishing industry. We reared lobsters, groupers, American redfish, dragonfly, Atlantic salmon, emperor crabs, and spotted shrimps. Especially since we have a good location here, the seafood we sell is much more expensive than other places. Everyone can look forward to this year's fishery harvest. Looking at everyone's envious eyes, Jianghu also said with a smile. This year, we sold a total of 13,700 tons of American redfish, $40 per kilogram. How much per ton? 40,000. This year, we've sold 8,900 tons for $534 million. Anchovies are $65,000 a ton, and we've sold 7,980 tons for $518. $7 million. Atlantic salmon are $100,000 a ton, and we've sold 6,412 tons this year. That's $641. $2 million. Spotted shrimp are $30 a kilogram, lobsters are $5,000 a piece, and king crab is $2,000 a piece. Fish alone, we've sold 2,241. $9 million this year. Including the others and tuna, we've sold a total of $2,494,304,800 as of yesterday. Looking at everyone, Jianghu also read this year's harvest according to the information in his hand. To be honest, although he already knew, Jianghu still felt very impressed when he read it. Just these two items alone made Jianghu's annual income $5 billion. And most importantly, because Jianghu had bought the sea, he didn't have to pay taxes this year. According to the 2000th reward, it's a total of $98 million. I won't give you the small change. I'll give you $5 million directly. For the newcomers, I'll give a red packet. This $5 million will be divided equally between Edward Anderson, Tommy Charles, Eleanor Cece, Andrew Christian, and Marlon Rupert. $1 million each. Here you go. Hearing Jianghu's words, Edward Anderson and the others laughed, although they still didn't earn as much as the cowboys this year. But don't forget that Jianghu's waters had expanded by at least 5 times this year. According to Jianghu's nature, he would get more fish this year. And most importantly, Jianghu's fishing grounds now included the tuna production area. With Jianghu's magical scene, if they could mass-produce tuna. Even if it was just Big Eye and Masu tuna, their annual income would exceed $5 billion, or even higher. According to this ratio, the cowboys would fail sooner or later. Seeing the 5 people coming up to take Jianghu's check with a smile, Dulles Gerard and his apprentice Connor Murphy, who had been sitting calmly in the distance, couldn't help but sit up straight because they knew that what was next was theirs. Next is our manor's new industry, the winery. Because wine is sold by the year, we didn't sell much this year. In the beginning, we only sold 50,000 bottles. Later, we added 100,000 bottles. The initial price was $800 a bottle. Yes, the red wine you are drinking now, we sell it ourselves. The initial price was $800, and the later price was $1,200 a bottle. Looking at the crowd in front of him, Jianghu said with a smile. Hearing that the red wine they were drinking now was worth $1,200 a bottle, the Turner brothers couldn't help but look at each other. Even Penelope couldn't help but speed up her drinking. She just felt that this red wine was delicious, and she heard that it was brewed by Jianghu and the others. She thought that it would only sell for a few dozen dollars, or at most $100, but she didn't expect that the difference was 10 times less than what she thought. Looking at the wine in front of her, to be honest, she didn't quite understand, but since Jianghu could sell it, it meant that this wine was indeed worth the price. Our goal is $2,000 a bottle. This wine has such potential. I can predict that we will be able to sell it for this price within 3 years. Looking at the surprised expressions of the crowd in front of him, Dulles Gerard also stood up with a smile and said loudly to the crowd. Last year, he was the most embarrassed one here, but now he felt that he was the most dazzling one. Although we've only produced 150,000 bottles of wine this year, these 150,000 bottles have brought me a fortune of $160 million. Most importantly, we still have 2 million bottles of wine of this grade in our cellar. If we calculate it at $1,000 a bottle, that's $2 billion. So, Mr. Dulles and Mr. O'Connor Murphy, your rewards this year won't be any less than the average person's. I'll give you 2% of the profits, so that's $2 million in total. If you split it evenly, each of you will get $6 million. After Jianghu finished speaking, he took out 2 red checks with $1,600,000 written on them from his pocket. Looking at the checks in front of them, Dulles Gerard and O'Connor Murphy both smiled. This money was their reward, and this year, they could straighten their backs and receive this sum of money. They bowed to Jianghu like a European gentleman and took the checks. Then, they smiled and put them in their pockets. They would fly back to Europe tomorrow morning, and this sum of money was enough for them to hold their heads high in their respective families. Next, it's time for the new brothers. Because you came a little late this year, you didn't receive an official bonus. I've prepared $100,000 for each of you. This is the year-end bonus I'm giving you. As long as you serve our manor well next year, I believe that there will be 7 more millionaires here next year. What do you think? After giving out the big heads, Jianghu couldn't disappoint the newcomers, so he took out another $100,000 check from his pocket and put it in front of them. Hearing Jianghu's words, the 7 newcomers, whether they were fishermen or cowboys, all shouted loudly. Although more than $1 million had nothing to do with them this year, it was also good to get $100,000. It should be known that an annual income of $50,000 was considered middle class in the United States. Now, they had a bonus of $100,000. What was this called? This was called a high-income group. From this, it could be seen that their choice to come to Jianghu's place was not wrong. Jianghu was a good employer worthy of their lives. Next, it's time to party. Seeing the crowd shouting because of the money, Jianghu also picked up a glass of beer next to him, raised it high, and shouted loudly at the same time. Hearing Jianghu's voice, the others also shouted loudly. Whether they were drunk or not, at least they were now floating. Looking at Jianghu's high-spirited appearance among the crowd, Chia, Chi-jia, and the others who were gathered in the distance also laughed. Following such a man, it's hard to say if there will be times when they will regret it. Especially Chi-jia, Luya, Feng Yunqin, and Ai Xiaoxi, but every time they saw Jianghu, this kind of thought would disappear. They must have this man. Chapter 909. Wake up, Delina and Marion are still waiting for your gifts. Rallis, Biliak, Valentina, and Alfred are all back. You're still sleeping here. Chi-jia gently nudged Jianghu and whispered to him. Upon hearing her words, Jianghu opened his eyes in a daze and looked around. Indeed, everyone was awake except for him. Gazing at Chi-jia, who was wearing transparent pajamas, Jianghu hugged her instantly and stuck his face to her indescribable place, rubbing it gently. Along with Jianghu's actions, Chi-jia found that her 2 places were a bit strange. All right, it's still early in the morning. Haven't you had enough last night? Patting Jiang Hai's arm that was wrapped around her, Qi Jie's pretty face couldn't help but blush as she said to Jiang Hai. Hearing Qi Jie's words, Jiang Hai's somewhat heavy brain also recalled the absurd scene from last night. Last night, Jiang Hai's subordinates were still very restrained. At about 9 p.m., they had all left. Jiang Hai and the others didn't pack up, but directly returned to Jiang Hai's room. Yes, not only a few of them returned to Jiang Hai's room, but all of them returned to Jiang Hai's room. Delina, Marian, and Taraga all returned to their own rooms. Except for Jiang Hai, Qi Jie, Chia, Feng Yunqin, Ai Xiaoxi, Azalina, Galina Waskia, Wallace Shelley, Aphrodite, Dana, Hilda, Paige, Sheila, Shirley, Bridget, and Janice all followed in and took the initiative to have sex. As for what happened next, it was needless to say. Jiang Hai was also very talented, but even if each of them had sex for 20 minutes, it would still take 5 hours. Not to mention, there was also the second battle, especially with Azalina. Although she had been with Jiang Hai for a long time, it was her first time to participate in such a chaotic battle. In order to make her feel more relaxed, Jiang Hai had made a lot of advances on her. Jiang Hai couldn't even remember when he fell asleep. It seemed that he didn't fall asleep until dawn. According to the sunrise time in Winthrop, it was almost 5:00 in the morning. However, not long after, he was shaken awake by Qi Jie. "Okay, stop it, hurry up and get up." After patting Jiang Hai's arm, Qi Jie broke free from Jiang Hai's arm with her strong willpower and walked out of the room. After resting on the bed for about 10 minutes, Jiang Hai suddenly jumped up. If he didn't wake up last night, he could make up for it during the day. However, this morning's scene couldn't be delayed. After going to the bathroom to wash up, Jiang Hai put on his pajamas and took out a huge package from the corner of his closet. Inside the package, there were already wrapped gifts. It was Christmas, so he had to give gifts. Carrying the package, Jiang Hai went to the first floor. At this time, all the people in Jiang Hai's villa were already sitting around the Christmas tree, waiting for Jiang Hai to open the gifts. Seeing Jiang Hai come down with a big package, these people laughed happily. Sure enough, in addition to the people who participated in the celebration last night, Relis Carter, Biliak, Valentina, and El Sarah, who were originally on a mission, also came back. They also changed into the pajamas that belonged to this villa and looked at Jiang Hai happily. Looking at these girls waiting for him in front of him, Jiang Hai also quickened his pace. "Merry Christmas!" Jiang Hai shouted to the girls in front of him. Then everyone laughed happily. Even Galina, who was born with a cold face, didn't find that after coming to Jiang Hai's villa, her smile was much more than before. At this time, she was also laughing with Jiang Hai. "Come on, it's time to distribute the gifts. Here you are, this is yours." After laughing for a while, Jiang Hai began to distribute the gifts formally. First, he took out the gifts for Galina and Marian. After all, they were nominally his daughters. Although nobody took this seriously, nominally, it was still nominally recognized by the law. After receiving the gifts, Galina and Marian immediately opened them. Looking at the 2 platinum and diamond-studded bracelets, they couldn't help laughing. These 2 bracelets were not very expensive, $50,000 each, which was about 300,000 yuan. However, Jiang Hai's bracelets were custom-made. The broken diamonds on the bracelets were arranged with the abbreviations of their names. Originally, they were called Galina Evelyn and Marian Evelyn. However, in Jiang Hai's bracelets, one was DJ, the other was MJ. Well, these 2 abbreviations were actually quite ridiculous. Wasn't DJ supposed to play the game? Weren't MJ Jordan and Michael Jackson? In this regard, Jiang Hai could only laugh. Who could he blame for this? However, the 2 girls obviously liked this gift very much. They immediately put it on, then jumped up with a smile and kissed Jiang Hai's cheeks from both sides. Jiang Hai accepted this gift with ease. "Come on, Taraga, this is yours." After being kissed, Jiang Hai took out a box and handed it to Taraga. After Taraga opened it, she found that it was a Patek Philippe women's watch. All the girls in Jiang Hai's group had such a watch. This was bought by Jiang Hai when he went to Europe. However, Taraga came later, so she naturally didn't have one. Jiang Hai saw that she seemed to want it, so he naturally took the initiative to give it to her this time. Thank you, Jiang. Looking at the things that Jiang Hai gave her, Taraga was also quite satisfied. After thinking for a while, she stood up and kissed Jiang Hai on the cheek. After she went back to sit down, Jiang Hai continued to smile and divide the gifts. It had to be said that Jiang Hai was quite dedicated to these women around him. Jiang Hai more or less knew what they wanted. Although he didn't buy any particularly expensive gifts, each of the gifts was worth about $50,000 to $60,000. They were also quite happy. For example, Qi Jia got a coat, and Chia got a cookbook. Jiang Hai specially went to the Tan family's restaurant to ask for the cookbook when he returned to China. It cost him $500,000 to get it. Of course, there were no secret dishes in it, but it was worth $500,000. Aphrodite got a woman's suit, because Jiang Hai saw that she seemed to like Xing Jin's clothes very much. Dana got a bag that could cure all diseases. Of course, it was also a global limited edition. Hilda and Sierra got a mink. They liked this kind of fluffy clothes very much. Paige's gift was a set of perfume from Chanel. However, a set of perfume cost $300,000, which was really a huge profit. Ashiria got a set of makeup products, also from Chanel. Some Americans liked bare faces, while some liked to put on makeup. For example, Ashiria liked to put on makeup. Thick eyebrows, red lips, and she looked like a dead child who had just eaten. However, Jiang Hai was used to it, so he didn't think much of it. Bridget got a set of nail products, which was the cheapest among them. It only cost Jiang Hai about $10,000. However, the nail products inside were worth the money, because they were real gold, platinum, and diamonds, although they were broken diamonds. Janice got a pair of earrings. This was what she wanted the most, because she hadn't pierced her ears yet. Azalina got a set of wool hat, shirt, and scarf. These things were not cheap, and they didn't cost Jiang Hai too much money. However, they were made from the wool of the sheep in Jiang Hai's manor this year, so it was very meaningful. Jiang Hai also gave Valentina, who liked motorcycles, a gift. It was a motorcycle, known as the fastest motorcycle on land. Including cars, this motorcycle was the current world record holder, the Dodge Tomahawk. Unfortunately, this motorcycle was not allowed on the road, so after getting the key, Valentina could only play with it secretly. Wallace Shelley got a special computer from Jiang Hai. This computer was not to be underestimated. This was the best computer that Jiang Hai got from Google using his connections. Although it looked a little ugly, its configuration was the best in the world. This computer was originally custom-made by the US military, but Jiang Hai used his identity as a shareholder to get one for Wallace Shelley. In the future, the intelligence system in Jiang Hai's manor would also be controlled by this computer. Layla Scarter gave him a necklace, Beliak gave him a pair of boots, and Alessera gave him a beaded jade music box. Of course, the box itself was also a piece of jewelry. Galina received an oil painting. Who would have thought that this cold guy would like these things? After all the gifts were given, Jiang Hai also received a gift in return. Of course, there were all kinds of gifts in return. Azalina got an XM8 from somewhere and gave it to Jiang Hai. This gun had a great background because this gun was prepared by the US, but it had not been replaced with a new weapon. Jiang Hai was now a veteran when it came to guns. Naturally, he knew some things about the gun world. To be honest, he had always heard that Huaxia's gun clan was not too bad. It turned out that compared to the M16A2 level weapon, Huaxia's 95 gun clan was actually not too bad. It could be ranked in the top 20 internationally. But were there a total of 20 strong countries in the world? Jiang Hai chuckled at this. Moreover, the gap between the top 20 and the top 3 wasn't just big. At present, the best standard weapon was naturally the German G36, followed by the M4A1 of the US. This gun was called a carbine, but it was actually a rifle. It was powerful, and most importantly, it was short. All the special forces in the US, whether it was the Marine Corps, the Special Forces, or the paratroopers, were equipped with the M4A1. Further down the list were the M16A4, Belgium's SCAR, Switzerland's Psy-G, SG, 553. Wuxia's 95 gun clan was only slightly better than the AK-74, but not by much. Chapter 9-10. Wow, what a cool gun. Listening to the voice next to his ear, Jianghu also turned his head and looked at the source of the sound. The source of the sound was none other than John Turner, the youngest son of Philemon Turner. You like guns too? Hearing his words, Jianghu also looked at him, or to be exact, at them. In addition to him, there were also Philemon Turner and Louis Turner. Seeing Jianghu looking at them, they also laughed and said, "Of course, no man will not like this thing." Looking at the XM8 in Jianghu's hand, he couldn't help but squint and smile. Hearing his words, Jianghu also smiled. Yes, no man will not like guns. Just now in the room, they gave each other gifts. Jianghu gave the girls gifts, and the girls naturally gave Jianghu gifts. Although the price can't be compared with Jianghu's things, this is a kind gesture, many of which are handmade by them. For example, Ai Xiaoxi had sewn a sweater for Jianghu. She had learned how to sew it from her mother. Feng Yunshan knitted a scarf for Jianghu. He didn't know if it was passed from the east to the west, or from the west to the east. The things given were different, and the meaning was different. The scarf meant to love you forever, and the clothes meant to give you everything. Of course, Jianghu didn't understand these. In addition to the scarf and clothes, he also received a lighter, which was given by Luya. This lighter was not an ordinary thing. It belonged to the kind that could be used for survival in the wild. Qi Jia gave Jianghu a golden pen. But Jianghu's writing, to be honest, take out a cockroach, dip it in some ink and throw it on the paper, and it looks better than Jianghu's writing. When he was in school, he was famous for his cockroach writing. In addition, there were keychains, wallets, razors, and so on. There were a lot of things, but Jianghu's favorite was this gun. Speaking of this gun, it was also because of his relationship with Jianghu that he was able to get it. Jianghu gave Azalina and the others American citizenship. After all, after they were rescued, they would have no nationality. After becoming American citizens, they had the right to carry guns. Later, Jianghu applied for jobs for them as security personnel. Therefore, although they could not carry a sniper rifle at home like Bell, they could not do so. However, they were still able to apply for a normal rifle. Although they still couldn't apply for an automatic weapon, this was Winthrop. Jianghu was the overlord here. Azalina said that she wanted to apply for an XM8 for Jianghu. Was it possible that it wouldn't work? Therefore, while this XM8 was an automatic weapon, it also had a 30-round magazine. This is my girlfriend's baby. I can't lend it to you to play with, but the gun shop in town has the same model. You can go and play with it. Hearing John Turner's words, Jianghu also said with a smile. Really? Then I will definitely go and look around. Hearing Jianghu's words, John Turner also said with a smile. Boss, what are you going to do? Watching the conversation between Jianghu and John Turner and Philemon Turner also said with a smile. Although his son is not young, in fact, Philemon is not too old. In the United States, the consciousness in this area is very liberated, especially for some black people. It's normal to be a father at the age of 15 or 16. For example, for those NBA stars, almost 75% of them, that is, at least 3 of them will be fathers before entering the league. According to the NBA, you can enter the NBA at the age of 19. There are many people who become fathers at the age of 15 or 16. Compared with Wuxia, who became a father in his 20s or 30s, there are really not many people. Although Philemon Turner did not say that he would become a father at the age of 14 or 15, he was only 18 years old when he became a father. Now he is only in his early 40s and his child is already so old. He has to admit that this age gap is really not that big. I'm going to burn a gun, what about you? This is a family of 3. Hearing Philemon's words, Jianghu also patted his gun and the bullets he carried with him and said with a smile on his face. There is no sea where John lives. All the seafood is transported here, so the taste is very ordinary. I'm going to go to the dock to get a boat and go out to sea to get some seafood or something. Hearing Jianghu's words, Philemon Turner also said with a smile. Jianghu is quite lax with the people in his manner. If there is no meat, they will kill the cattle directly. If they want to eat fish and shrimp, they will go out to sea to catch them. They don't have to wait for the fishing boat to come back to get them. They can go out at any time, so they are very independent. But there are also some things that are absolutely not allowed to be caught. If you catch fish, it doesn't matter if you only eat some cod, shrimp, or even spotted shrimp. Abalone, sea cucumber, and other things can be eaten casually. Lobsters that are less than 20 pounds can also be eaten casually. But first, it is not allowed to be wasted. Second, those high-level fish are not allowed to be caught. For example, the Yangtze River swordfish raised in Jianghu's river, the large yellow croaker and Chinese bahaba fish outside, tuna and the like are not allowed to be eaten casually by the crew and cowboys. Fortunately, they are not such people. They also know the profit of these things, so they will not eat these things. It's the same where I burn a gun. Let's go out to sea together. By the way, I will also get something to eat. The whole lamprey last night tasted good. We can catch some. Smacking his lips, Jianghu looked at Philemon Turner and said with a smile. Hearing that Jianghu is also going out to sea, Philemon Turner naturally didn't care. The 4 of them went to the distant shed together, rode a 4-wheeled mountain bike, and ran in the direction of the dock. When they arrived at the dock, they found that there were also people there. Because Tommy Charles, Eleanor Cece, and Andrew Christian were all here for the new year this year and had nothing to do at home, they were still used to staying at the dock. When Jianghu and the others arrived, they happened to be here. After explaining the situation, they took out a small boat. Jianghu and Philemon's family of 3 boarded the boat and sped towards the deep sea. After a while, Philemon slowed down the boat and took out a fishing line. There were many bottles on the fishing line. These bottles were all specially made. They were not wide, but very long. One end of the bottle was uncovered, while the other end had a lid. There was a small hook on the lid of the other end. This thing was used to catch lampreys. This wasn't Jianghu's first or second time doing this. Naturally, he was very familiar with the process. He hung some frozen beef innards on the small hooks and pulled. Then he stretched the fishing line, making the hooks firmly stuck on the other side of the small bottles. After everything was done, Jianghu and Philip put the small bottles in front of them one by one, letting them sink to the bottom of the water. This was the cage used to catch the lampreys. To be honest, Jianghu didn't eat this thing because it was really ugly. From the front, it looked like a large intestine with teeth. It wasn't just 1 or 2 teeth, but many of them. It looked very disgusting. From the side, it looked okay. It had 1 big eye and 7 gills. It looked a little cute. For fish farmers, this kind of creature was actually Jianghu's enemy. This was because these lampreys were used to kill fish. This kind of creature would directly bite the fish and be regarded as a parasitic creature. It lived by sucking blood. After a fish was sucked, it could only wait for death. This kind of creature could eat 40 big fish a year. It would even attach itself to dolphins. It was definitely a marine pest. Most importantly, this kind of creature could live not only in the sea, but also in fresh water. In order to prevent this kind of creature from entering the inland, the United States had even sprinkled drugs and killed a lot of these creatures' seedlings. So for a period of time, this kind of creature was almost impossible to see. But recently, as people started to like eating this kind of creature again, this kind of creature's population recovered. Jianghai's fishing ground was very big, and it was within the lampreys' range. Naturally, there were a lot of lampreys in his fishing ground. In the beginning, Jianghai also hated this kind of parasitic creature. After all, the fish it parasitized were all his money. But then, Edward Anderson told Jianghai that it was not necessarily a bad thing to have this kind of creature as a parasite. Just like the Chinese people said, if you get a bucket of carp, grass carp, and the like, they might die soon. But if you put in a carnivorous snakehead fish, these fish could live for a long time. This was because they had to move, and they were afraid of being eaten. These lampreys played this role. Schools of fish also needed to move. Although Jianghai had Big Fool, the overlord of the sea, Big Fool was Jianghai's fish. So it would not take the initiative to eat Jianghai's fish. If it was hungry, it would eat one or two. But most of the time, it would go out to the sea to catch fish. These lampreys did not care about this. They would come to eat the fish. But their speed was much slower than the fish, and they were not as agile. Every fish that it parasitized, if they weren't sick, then they were weak. So it not only solved the problem of the weak fish, but also solved the problem of the sick fish. It also made the healthy fish exercise. Although it made Jianghai lose some fish, it made more fish healthier. So according to Edward Anderson's words, this may not be a bad thing. Of course, the number of these creatures must be controlled. If there were too many of them, then it would be a disaster. Fortunately, these creatures were easy to catch, and there were many people who were willing to spend money to buy them. In the beginning, some people told Jianghai that lampreys should be a supreme delicacy. Even in the European Middle Ages, there was a king who ate them to death. But they still came to eat them. In the eyes of the Americans, lampreys were also one of the top ingredients. Jianghai's face was full of disbelief and disdain. But after he ate a lampreys with Bordeaux sauce, everything changed. Chapter 9-11. The reason why French cuisine was the most expensive cuisine in the world was inseparable from its sauces. Of course, there would probably be a lot of people who would scold Jianghai for being unpatriotic. If they were talking about expensive cuisines, Chinese cuisine should be the most expensive. However, in this world, no matter what, everything had to be balanced. There were indeed many expensive ways to eat Chinese cuisine, but the ones that ordinary people could eat were actually very cheap. For example, in roadside restaurants, the price of Chinese cuisine could only be said to be very high. As for French cuisine, as long as it was a French restaurant, even if you just went in to eat a plate of fried rice, it would be several times more expensive than Chinese fried rice. It could even be tens or hundreds of times more expensive. The upper limit may have its own merits, but the lower limit. Obviously, French cuisine was not for ordinary people to eat. And the sauces were the essence of French cuisine. Almost every chef would have their own secret sauce, and the taste was all different. But basically, they were all made from 6 different French sauces. These 6 kinds of sauces were also known as the 6 basic sauces. One of the most famous was the black pepper sauce that people who often ate steak would definitely know. However, those who were really knowledgeable knew that the black pepper sauce was made from beef bone braised sauce. The beef bone sauce was the most basic of the 6 basic sauces. This sauce was made from beef bones. It was made in the late 19th century, which was the 18th century. In order to make this sauce, the beef bones needed to be turned in the oven every 20 minutes for a total of 5 hours. Then, it needed to be put into the soup for 3 days, 72 hours. During these 3 days, the fire could not be stopped, and the water naturally could not be dried. The purpose was to fully display the aroma that penetrated into the bone marrow and integrate the collagen in the beef bones into the soup. This way, the beef bone sauce would be the most authentic. However, at present, more than 90% of the black pepper sauce in the world was made from purchased black pepper sauce, and the black pepper sauce sold here was made from purchased black pepper sauce powder mixed with water. The taste was almost the same for laymen, but for experts, it was like heaven and earth. In addition to these two sauces, there was also mushroom sauce, which was also a big family. It used cream as the base, and by adding different mushrooms, it produced different tastes. In this big family, the most luxurious sauce was naturally the black truffle sauce made from French black truffles. Jianghu also had truffles, so Chia also made this sauce for Jianghu. In addition, there was also Bohème sauce, which had been recorded in 1836 French recipes. It was a derivative of French hollandaise sauce, and the origin of the name of the sauce was in honor of Henry IV, the founder of the Bourbon dynasty, so it was named after his production, Bohème. There was also blue cheese sauce, which was made from cheese. It was rich in milk flavor, and the taste was quite rich, but unfortunately, Jianghu didn't produce cheese here, so no one in his manor knew how to make this. He only ate it outside. The last thing to introduce was Bordeaux sauce, which was the so-called red wine sauce. This kind of sauce was quite particular. If you want to make it well, you must use the red wine sauce produced in Bordeaux. Dry red wine, white wine, and so on were not good, and the place of origin was also very strict. Only the red wine produced in Bordeaux could be used to make red wine sauce. Similarly, beef bone sauce was used as the base, red wine and spices were added to boil, and finally, beef bone marrow was added to improve the taste. The best match was Bordeaux's Baz's beef, but Jianghu's Angus beef was not worse than these beef cattle. Of course, this kind of sauce absolutely couldn't be used with beef that was too fat. For example, the most famous beef in Japan was the existence of this kind of sauce. This was not targeted at anyone, but it was just the way things were. Jianghu's red wine sauce naturally couldn't be imported from Bordeaux. Dulles Gerard also knew the method of making this kind of red wine, so when making wine, he deliberately made some wine that was specially used for cooking. For example, the red wine for stewing beef, the red wine for making this kind of red wine sauce, and so on. Of course, every kind of red wine was different, but in Jianghu's house, the only one who could make it clear was Chia. Originally, when they caught the lamprey, Jianghu refused to eat it. After all, it was too ugly. But when Chia followed the recipe and made the European royal family's favorite lamprey with Bordeaux sauce, Jianghu fell in love with this kind of delicacy. No one was born to dislike eating something. The reason why you dislike eating something is because you haven't eaten anything delicious before. Just like the people in Bing City, almost no one likes to eat rabbits. It was because those things were too disgusting, especially Bing City's famous smoked rabbit. Even Jianghu, a local, didn't like to eat it. It was fishy, tasteless, and the meat was too dry. But when the people in Bing City went to Sichuan, the people in Bing City were dumbfounded when they saw the way the rabbits were cooked. Bing City did not have Barton rabbit, dried pot rabbit, these cooking methods and the use of taste. It was the same for lamprey. In China, lamprey was not even edible because it was said to be poisonous. But in the US and Europe, it was the best delicacy. To be honest, it tasted like eel, but the meat was much more delicious than eel. After Jianghu and Philip put down the cages, they started to fish. They were not in a hurry to burn their guns. They could shoot a few times before they left. If they shot now, the fish would be scared away. They hung the ground beef they got at the dock. Jianghu, Philip, Louis, and John Turner each had a rod. They sat in the boat and waited. Marine fish and river fish were somewhat similar. Because the sea was not frozen, the marine fish did not lack oxygen or food. As for river fish, there was a layer of ice on the surface of the river, just like the artificial river in Jianghu's manor. It was almost half a meter thick. Because of the ice on the surface of the river, there was a lack of oxygen and food. In order to adapt to this kind of life, the fish would try to stay still and not move when there was no food. Therefore, it was easy to fish in the river in winter, especially in Winthrop. If there was a hole in the river, fish would jump out because it was too suffocating. But in the sea, because of the cold, fish did not like to move and did not like to waste energy to eat. In addition, they did not lack oxygen, so it was harder to catch fish in the sea than in the river. But that was only limited to ordinary people. How could Jiang Hai's beef not be able to catch fish? After more than 10 minutes, Jiang Hai's fishing rod moved. At this time, Jiang Hai suppressed his thoughts and quietly waited for the fish to take the bait. As the fishing rod was suddenly pulled away, Jiang Hai also smiled. He immediately grabbed the rollers on the fishing rod and pulled the fish back forcibly. This was Jiang Hai's powerful strength. As long as the fishing rod could withstand it, even if it was a whale, Jiang Hai had the ability to put it back into the sea. White whales may be okay, but for killer whales and blue whales, Jiang Hai could not pull them up even if he was exhausted. After all, he was only 8 times the physical limit of a human being. He did not want to think about things that weighed dozens of tons. The physical limit of a human being, according to the standards of the modern Olympic Games, was more than 105 kilograms, and the clean and jerk was only more than 260 kilograms. The physical limit of a human being, in the Marvel world, was about 1,000 pounds, less than 500 kilograms. Jiang Hai's physical fitness was 8 times the physical limit of a human being, which meant that he could only lift about 4 tons. If you gave him a small car, he could easily flip it over or even lift it up with his explosive strength. But if you asked him to catch a whale, an adult killer whale weighed nearly 10 tons, and he might only be able to lift a white whale. However, it was obvious that the fish that Jiang Hai caught was not a whale, and a whale was not a fish. As Jiang Hai quickly pulled the roller, a struggling fish appeared in front of Jiang Hai. As Jiang Hai exerted his strength, a big fish shining with red light was pulled into the air by him and then fell onto the boat. Seeing this scene, John Turner and Louis Turner immediately rushed over, took out their mobile phones, and began to take pictures. They had seen this kind of fish before, but it was the first time they had seen it alive. Wow, it's a red snapper. My luck is not bad. Looking at the big fish that was almost 60 centimeters long in front of him, Jiang Hai also laughed. After the two finished taking pictures, he took off the hook and threw it into the water tank next to him. Yeah, but it's not a small guy. Boss, don't you Wuxia people pay attention to a good start? Hearing Jiang Hai's words, Philemon looked at the fish in front of him and couldn't help but laugh. At this time, he felt his hands sink. It seemed that this should be a school of fish. He couldn't pull the fish up directly like Jiang Hai, so he was walking the fish. At the same time, he also told his 2 sons not to look at the fish. Now that it had passed the school of fish, it was a good time to fish. Perhaps in winter, the temptation of clam worms and the like for these sea fishes would plummet. Even the beef from Jiang Hai was the best bait all year round. The aura and energy contained in it was far from being comparable to some insects in nature. Animals were much more sensitive than humans. For these beef with aura, they would not let it go. Just as John Turner and Louis Turner returned to their fishing rods were also bitten. However, compared to their father, they were far worse. They wanted to pull the fish back, but they couldn't. They wanted to slip away, but they couldn't. Looking at them, Jiang Hai couldn't help but laugh. Looking at them, Jiang Hai suddenly remembered himself when he first came here. When he went fishing, he seemed to be very stupid. He caught a shark by force, but it was precisely because he caught that shark that his fishery now had such a patron saint. Chapter 9:12. As Philemon Turner and his 2 sons pulled up the fish with great difficulty, Jiang Hai also took a look. It has to be said that the father and son trio's luck is still good. Philip caught a barracuda, the kind that Jiang Hai introduced, called a sea wolf barracuda, while John Turner and Louis Turner caught a red snapper like Jiang Hai. If there was no accident, it was very likely that a group of barracuda was chasing after the red snapper below sea level. Although the red snapper was wider than the barracuda, it was far less ferocious. Barracuda were also called sea wolves, and they were extremely ferocious. They even dared to hunt injured sharks and the like. After catching them, the first thing to do was to kill them. Otherwise, they would bite whatever they saw, which could easily injure people. With these 3 fish, the Philip father and son trio could be considered to have a harvest. Then after Jiang Hai finished firing 60 rounds, he carried his gun and prepared to return. Naturally, when he returned, he also needed to pick up the line that they had logged off. Jianghu didn't have many lampreys here, but it definitely wasn't a small number. Not to mention, they used the internal organs of the beef cattle in Jianghu's manor as bait. If the iron cylinder wasn't too small, even big fish would have been hooked. Although they had only set the trap for less than an hour, when they got up, 2/3 of the lampreys had already been caught. Jianghu had set a total of 30 lampreys, and it didn't take long for 20 of them to be caught. It was indeed a rich resource. They picked out the mature ones that were more than half a meter long and put them back. There were 12 lampreys left. After Jianghu gave 3 to Philemon's family, he took the remaining 9 home. As for the red snapper, he also gave it to Philemon. Jianghu's family didn't lack fish. His main purpose here was to burn the gun and get some lampreys. After returning, looking at the living lampreys, Chia was very happy and immediately went to the kitchen to clean them up. The others were also helping to clean up the mess from last night. Whatever the family did together, they were actually quite happy. At least, Jianghu was quite happy. In the afternoon, Jianghu and the others sat together and watched TV. American TV channels were competitive, unlike domestic TV channels, which were more or less within the system. The competition was also within the system. Let's put it another way. For example, a country was like a school. The competition in America was like a competition between classes. Class 1 and Class 2 were competing to get more people, so they were competing to come up with better programs. In China, the competition was like a competition between classes. The class monitor was like a court. There was no need to fight for this position. The other school committee members, sports committee members, group leaders, class representatives, and so on would have to fight for it. However, because they were all in the same class, there was a bottom line to the competition. In the United States, other than illegal things, you could do anything, such as smearing your opponent's name, or even fighting. It can be said that the competition in the United States was much fiercer than in China. It was also because of this fierceness that the TV channels in the United States competed with each other. If you produce a TV series, I will produce a better one. If you produce a variety show, I will produce one too. If there was no competition, there would be no improvement. In the United States, the competition was obviously very fierce. But to be honest, the competition was the fiercest in a country that Jianghu had been to before, South Korea. In such a small place, 3 TV channels were fighting for viewers. It was not an exaggeration to say that there were grudges. Other than some special celebrities, other people were not allowed to talk about other channels' programs on some TV stations. Although the United States was not like this, the situation was not much better. It was common to see several hosts smearing each other's reputation. But for the audience, this was something that they liked to see. Jianghu also liked to watch them talk nonsense. After dinner, Jianghu and the others were not Christians, so there was no need to be too entangled with these things. They went to bed very early. But because of yesterday's craziness, they were much quieter today. They left Jianghu to Rallis Carter, Beliak, Valentina, and Alès Sarah, who had just returned today. Jianghu also had a good sleep with them. But the next morning, before the sky was bright, Jianghu was awakened by the ringing of his phone. He picked up the phone in a daze. It turned out that it was Mayor Wallace. Today was a big carnival night. Why was he calling him so early instead of resting at home? He looked at the time. It was only 5:00 in the morning. "Hello, Mayor, what's the matter?" Patting the girls around him who also woke up because of the ringing of the phone, Jianghu walked into the bathroom. While turning on the water, he asked Mayor Wallace. "Anyway, I'm up, I'll pee first." "Hey, I know you didn't get up at this time. Something happened. Come to the town's hospital quickly." Hearing Jianghu's confused voice, Mayor Wallace sighed and then said somewhat speechlessly. "Huh? What do you mean?" Hearing his words, Jianghu asked him with some doubts. "What does this mean?" "Because it was Christmas last night, Many tourists stayed at our townspeople's house. There might be something wrong with the food they ate. Many of them were sent to the hospital last night, and there are even more today. If you have time, come and take a look." Listening to the urgent words of Mayor Wallace on the phone, Jianghu also woke up from his sleep. "Hospitalized? Then I'll go and see." After thinking about it, Jianghu decided to go and see what was going on. Was someone poisoning or something? He had to know in his heart. But if it was poisoning, then it should be 1 or 2 people who were poisoned. How could so many people be poisoned? What the hell is this? After thinking about it, Jianghu hung up the phone and returned to the room. After saying a few words to the girls, he put on his clothes and went downstairs. At this time, the manor and the villa were still dark. When Jianghu went downstairs, only little Huang and Xiaobai heard the sound of Jianghu coming downstairs. They looked up at him and didn't react. After Jianghu motioned them to go back to sleep, they also lay down and continued to sleep. Jianghu left the villa and drove to the hospital in the town. Because of the tourism development, the hospital in the town was also rebuilt. Before this, the hospital in the town was actually a small clinic. Winthrop was about an hour's drive from Boston, so if there was any serious illness, they could go to Boston to see a doctor. But since Winthrop became a tourist attraction, the supporting facilities here must be done well, and the hospital was the same. Therefore, after a discussion between Jianghu and the Winthrop Town Hall, they decided to expand the hospital. Now, although the hospital here can't be compared to the top 3 hospitals in the country, it is definitely not worse than the average municipal hospital. The doctors and nurses in the hospital were considered to be the best in the country. After all, they had the foundation to back it up. After the expansion of the hospital, whether it was tourists or locals, they received a lot of protection. But there had never been an incident like today. A large number of tourists were hospitalized. This incident would be a blow to the tourism industry in Winthrop, and it would even cause disputes between the 2 countries and cause diplomatic trouble. Thinking of this, Jianghu couldn't help but slap his forehead. It was really troublesome. Jianghu's shield sped all the way. About half an hour after leaving home, he arrived at the hospital in Winthrop. However, as soon as he walked in, he realized that the situation here could really be described as being at daggers drawn. In the hospital, almost all the wards were occupied, and there were many wards in the corridor. These patients looked like they were vomiting and having diarrhea. It couldn't be an act. That meant that they were really poisoned. As for the tourists who weren't poisoned, many of them were surrounding the hospital. They were afraid, or perhaps the families of these people were waiting for someone to give them an explanation. Perhaps they were afraid that these tourists would cause trouble. So Winthrop Hospital specially called the police. When the police arrived, the atmosphere on both sides became even more tense. The 2 sides confronted each other, and the patients vomited and had diarrhea. The whole scene was extremely chaotic. When Jianghu's car stopped, almost everyone looked at Jianghu. Seeing that Jianghu got out of the car, many tourists rushed over. "We came here to have fun, but something like this happened. What do you think we should do?" "I said that these Americans must be up to no good. They must have poisoned us together." "Jianghu, I heard that you were the one who poisoned us. You have to give us an explanation. You tricked your countrymen. You are a fake foreigner. Do you have any shame?" When these people surrounded Jianghu, many of them pointed their guns at him. They also knew that they came here to have fun, and the person who pulled the strings in the United States was Jianghu. Now that they saw Jianghu coming, these people's faces darkened, and they shouted at Jianghu loudly. Many people turned on their mobile phones and recorded the conflict here. Jianghu did not know if there was a live broadcast, but listening to their words, Jianghu's face did not look good. "No one is holding a knife to your neck. I don't care if you spend money or eat here. I just came here to see what's going on. Whether you die here or not has nothing to do with me. Now get out of my way, I want to go in." Jianghu did not care if there was a live broadcast or a video recording. He directly pointed at the people who had spoken so harshly and scolded them directly. Hearing Jiang Hai's words, the tourists here were about to go crazy. At this time, Jiang Hai still dared to say such words to provoke them. Jiang Hai was crazy. Chapter 9:13. Seeing that Jiang Hai was still so tough in the face of so many people, the family members of the tourists outside couldn't take it anymore. On the spot, several men rubbed their fists and walked over. They wanted to start a fight. There were so many of them, but Jiang Hai pointed at their noses and scolded them. They couldn't stand this anger. In China, the law had always been unable to punish the majority. They knew that even if they hit Jiang Hai could only suffer in silence. Would he dare to retaliate against them? However, it was a pity that Jiang Hai was never a kind-hearted person. If these people dared to make the first move, then Jiang Hai would certainly not spare them. If they wanted to make him eat this dumb loss, then he would have to ask, based on what? Sacrificing the interests of the minority to protect the majority. This kind of method didn't work for Jiang Hai. Now, the people who wanted to mess with him were basically all dead. Although he wouldn't kill these tourists, fighting back was inevitable. Bang! Quiet. But unfortunately, the police over there didn't give Jiang Hai a chance to make a move. Seeing that Jiang Hai was surrounded, the police sent over here immediately fired a warning shot. Hearing the gunshot, the crowd calmed down. Because they knew that this was America. Before they came, the tour guide had repeatedly warned them not to have a direct confrontation with the American police. This was because the police had the right to kill the other party directly, no matter who the other party was. What they did in China didn't work here. In America, if a rich person or a politician attacked the police while the police were on duty, the police could directly shoot him to death. This was the power of the American police. Although the tourists did not say that they were beaten to death, there were drunkards who caused trouble and had their legs pierced. Moreover, they did not pay a single cent and took care of their own medical expenses. They were directly sent back to their home country. It was useless to stir up public opinion in the country because these videos could be viewed by anyone at any time. Everyone knew what was going on. It was not easy to gain sympathy in the United States. Hearing the police fire, these people suppressed their emotions. Many people glared at Jiang Hai, but Jiang Hai ignored them. He directly pushed the people in front of him and walked into the hospital. As soon as he walked in, he saw Mayor Wallace walking back and forth. What's the situation? Looking at Mayor Wallace, Jiang Hai asked him. Hearing Jiang Hai's words, Mayor Wallace sighed and said somewhat helplessly, the situation isn't very good. Although no one's life is in danger, it seems that the blow to Winthrop is quite big. What's the specific situation? Looking at the old mayor who seemed to have aged a lot in an instant, Jiang Hai also said seriously. Then Mayor Wallace introduced the situation here to Jiang Hai. The people who were poisoned were from 2 regiments. These 2 regiments, speaking of which, were specially prepared by the travel agency that Jiang Hai had cooperated with in order to develop business in the south. Almost no one in these 2 regiments had seen snow before. Taking advantage of Christmas in Winthrop, they could not only see snow, but also experience the New Year of the Americans. Therefore, these 2 regiments were recruited very quickly and came very quickly. There were a total of 97 people in the 2 regiments, but this time, 63 of them were in the hospital. Jiang Hai looked at these people who were admitted to the hospital. There were old people, children, and adults. He asked the doctor, but the doctor couldn't tell him why they were poisoned. They were definitely poisoned, but they were also a little confused because they also tested the food vomited by these people, but they didn't find anything, which made them a little confused. Holding the test results, Jiang Hai stood in the corridor. To be honest, he also had a flash of the question whether someone had spread the poison. But soon, he rejected it. Although Winthrop used to be the territory of white people decades ago, it had been decades. Moreover, there were many yellow people here. It should be known that next to it was the highest educational institution in the hearts of yellow people, Harvard. Therefore, there were definitely many people who would come here every year. In all these years, there had not been any news of people poisoning yellow people. How could Jianghu have encountered it now? Therefore, there must be something behind this matter that he himself didn't notice. At this time, he saw a child in the distance who was not very seriously injured. He walked over and squatted beside the child. Beside the child was the child's mother. As the mother, her child was poisoned, and as a mother, she was definitely distressed. Moreover, she didn't know Jianghu, so when she saw that it was a yellow person who came over, she didn't pay much attention. "Little boy, can you tell me what you ate last night?" Seeing that no one stopped him, Jianghu asked the little boy in front of him. After the child glanced at Jianghu, he thought for a while, then he was very cooperative and slowly spoke. "I didn't eat anything, I just ate the lobster at the landlady's house. I also drank some drinks, turkey, some vegetables, and hamburgers." Listening to what the little boy said, it was just like what normal people eat at Christmas, and these people ate at the same table. Why only the people from Wuxia were poisoned, and the Americans were fine? Hearing the little boy's words, Jianghu became more and more puzzled. Suddenly, he heard the little boy's voice, and it was a little buzzing. "Little boy, do you have a cold?" Thinking of this, a signal suddenly flashed in Jianghu's mind. He remembered that he seemed to have said something to Chia during dinner before, and it seemed to be related to this matter. "Well, I took cold medicine and also took the vitamin tablets here." After hearing Jianghu's words, the little boy also nodded seriously. When Jianghu heard his words, he stood up and touched his head. He already knew what was going on. "Everyone, don't be so nervous, this is actually a misunderstanding." Looking at the people who were still at daggers drawn at the door, Jianghu said loudly. Hearing Jianghu's words, the originally solemn atmosphere couldn't help but stagnate, and everyone looked at him. "What did you say? This is a misunderstanding. It's obvious that these Americans are poisoning us." Hearing Jianghu's words, a woman stood up and said loudly. Compared to a misunderstanding, she was more inclined to believe that someone wanted to harm her. People who can come to Winthrop to play are all rich people, and what rich people are most afraid of is that someone wants to harm them. Ahem, I'm just telling you what's going on. Whether it's a misunderstanding or someone poisoned you, naturally, the judicial authorities will decide. You can judge for yourselves. Ignoring the woman, Jianghu continued to speak loudly. Hearing Jianghu's words, everyone temporarily quieted down. Of course, more importantly, it was because the police outside had also walked in. These police officers were quite a deterrent to these tourists. Now, I'll say it first. The people who were poisoned are basically tourists from the Southern Tour Group, and they all caught a cold. Hearing Jianghu's words, the poisoned tourists looked at each other. If he didn't say this, they wouldn't have felt anything, but now that he said it, it seemed to be true. Could it be that the person who poisoned them is not only a yellow person, but also a regional dog? This time, if there are no accidents, I'm 80% sure that this is a misunderstanding. The main reason is because you all caught a cold and the things you ate. Looking at the crowd in front of him, Jianghu said seriously. Then, Jianghu explained why these people were poisoned. It was mainly related to 4 kinds of food: seafood, cola, vitamin C, and cold medicine. There was a period of time when it was very serious. It was said that shrimp and vitamin C couldn't be eaten because it would produce arsenic. Cola and cold medicine couldn't be eaten because it was also fatal. There were also many chemical examples. But it was quickly overturned. Some of the chemical formulas couldn't be written here. It was said that there was something called level 5 or something in seafood that could react with vitamin C and become level 3 or something. It was poison, and people would die after eating it. But in fact, the amount produced was almost zero. Basically, what was produced was another kind of substance that couldn't be digested and would be excreted from the body. So, this was one of the reasons. Secondly, cola and cold medicine were actually not that harmful to the human body, unless they were eaten every day and in large quantities. Overall, this was what happened. These tourists from the south came to Winthrop because they didn't know how cold it was here. This was normal. The cold in the north was dry and cold. It wasn't something that could be withstood by wearing a lot of clothes. In the north, thin and warm clothing was important. So, whether it was down jackets or mink jackets, they were not very thick, but they were very tight. Moreover, they were used to seeing snow and ice, so they weren't too excited. As for the tourists from the south, it was their first time seeing snow and ice, so they definitely wanted to play. If they wore thick clothes, they would sweat a lot. If the wind blew, they would catch a cold. In America, there was no cold medicine. Cold medicine was prescribed. You couldn't buy it at pharmacies. So, before they came here, the tour guides would ask the tourists to prepare their own cold medicine. But they couldn't prepare it. There were certain pseudo-anesthetic drugs like kangkong and kangtek that couldn't be brought. These were not allowed. Basically, everyone brought something like Coca-Cola. This type of Western medicine contained another substance that would produce some unpleasant effects with Coca-Cola. Americans especially liked to drink cola. They only drank cola, and almost no one in China knew about this. After coming to Winthrop, they caught a cold. But even if they took cold medicine, they still had to go out to play in the day. So, the cold wouldn't go away so easily. How long could they take cold medicine for? So basically, everyone who caught a cold would go to the local pharmacies to buy cold medicine. The local pharmacies only sold vitamins. This was because Americans didn't take cold medicine. They took vitamins to survive. This was the main source of cold medicine and vitamins. It was Christmas. Every family in Winthrop was eating lobster, seafood, and cola. It was fine to eat 1, 2, or even 3 of these things together. But when the 4 were mixed together, some problems would occur. Although it wasn't fatal, vomiting and diarrhea were inevitable. Chapter 9:14. Check it out immediately. Hearing Jianghai's words, the doctor in the hospital immediately said. After hearing the doctor's words, the people next to him immediately moved. Seeing the doctor move, most of the people were very cooperative. They came here to have fun, not to extort money or anything. Now that they knew it was a misunderstanding and there was a way to cure it, they were very cooperative. But some people didn't think so. Seeing that a few people were still quarreling there, Jianghai chuckled. Wuxia was too big and there were too many people. You can't expect everyone to be of the same quality, including the Americans. In the United States, there were many people of low quality. More than 70% of the black people were quite low quality. They urinated and defecated everywhere. After watching so many American TV series and movies, as long as you went to the black area in the United States, the situation there was always beyond your imagination. Therefore, the police had many ways to deal with the tourists who insisted on not receiving treatment. After Jianghai figured out what was going on, he stopped talking. The next thing was the dispute between Winthrop and the tourists. Then Jianghai went back to sleep. He was used to sleeping until he woke up naturally. He hadn't woken up naturally for 3 days. For him, this was torture. Just when he went back to sleep, Winthrop reached an agreement with most of the tourists. They waived the hospitalization fees and gave some discounts. That was all. After all, this was indeed a misunderstanding. But some people still didn't give up. That night, when it was still daytime in Wuxia, many posts were posted in China, criticizing Winthrop, saying that the people here drugged them, saying that Jianghai was a Japanese, and that many of them were now lying in the hospital, but no one came to check on them. As soon as this post was posted in China, many internet celebrities reposted it. Jianghai knew very well what netizens were like. They liked to stand on the moral high ground and criticize everything. So when this post spread, it instantly caused a lot of waves. Then, many people came out, saying that they had been to Winthrop and encountered the same thing. They said that the Americans were not kind, that Jianghai was a Japanese, and that he deserved a good death for taking the money of the Chinese. There was serious racial discrimination there, and people beat them up. They called the police, but no one cared, and so on. It was undeniable that some people's imaginations were so rich. If you told them a cent, they would treat it as 100,000. Of course, there were also some people who had been to Winthrop. They replied to the post, saying that they had never encountered such a thing, and that Winthrop was not bad. The things they sold were cheaper than in China, and the quality was good. The townspeople were also very friendly. They ate well, played well, and lived well. The expenses were not high. But when such comments were made, the netizens kept scolding them. They said that these people were all pennies, and that they were sinners of the Chinese people. Looking at such fierce comments, not many people had been to Winthrop, so the limelight was quickly suppressed. At this time, many reporters appeared, writing articles as if they had been to Winthrop personally. They described it as a place of evil. The townspeople were racist, and would attack Wuxia for no reason. Guns and drugs were everywhere. Every night, there would be gunfights on the streets. The prices were very high. They were trying to kill Wuxia people, and the tour guides were not responsible. They threw the tourists there and did not care about them anymore. In an instant, the phone of the travel agency that cooperated with Jianghu was about to explode. When they heard these comments, the travel agency was stunned. They immediately clarified on the official website and posted many photos. But all of this was useless. Netizens and cyberviolence were just like that. If they were certain of something, even if you told them that they were wrong, they wouldn't think that they were wrong. They would just straighten their necks and scold loudly. At around noon, the news reached Jianghu's ears. After all, the travel agency also had to tell Jianghu about this. They were considered business partners. If something happened, they naturally had to let Jianghu know. However, Jianghu's words made the travel agency stunned. Jianghu's original words were, "Why should I care about them?" To Jianghu, if they wanted to boycott, then boycott. What did it have to do with him? Jianghu was not a celebrity. Secondly, he was not involved in real estate, stocks, or economics. He was in the business. He did not send anything to China at all. In China, the only company that was related to him was the Qi Group. However, no one would touch the Qi Group. The Qi Group was so big. If the Qi Group collapsed, would the country take care of the tens of thousands of employees under it? Therefore, the country would not allow anyone to touch the Qi Group. Therefore, if they wanted to boycott, then so be it. He did not earn money from China. His main beef was still sold in America. Of course, he also sold fish and grass. Therefore, he did not care about these. Whether those people were dead or alive had nothing to do with him. He wasn't some saint who wanted everyone to like him. Jianghu didn't. He was such a person now. It was as simple as that. As for the travel agency, it would more or less affect them. However, after Jianghu explained it to them, they felt that it did not affect them much. Because just like what Jianghu said, how many of these netizens who criticized them on the internet would come to Winthrop to play? Since they were not potential customers, why should they care about them? Moreover, the netizens were passionate for 3 days. After 3 days, no one would care about Jianghu and the rest. It had to be admitted that sometimes, it was good to give them the cold shoulder. On the first day, the country was in an uproar. There were many netizens who scolded Jianghu and Winthrop. There were even some who wanted to conduct a human search on Jianghu. However, after the search, they found out a lot of things. For example, Jianghu earned billions a year, Jianghu was a shareholder of Google, Jianghu was a shareholder of the Qi Group, etc. When these identities were added together, some of the more rational netizens said that Jianghu was so rich now. Why did he still want to harm his countrymen? Therefore, some netizens shut up. However, this agitated a group of netizens who hated the rich even more. They clamored all day long. However, no matter if it was Jianghu, the travel agency, or the Qi Group, they all ignored them. They just did whatever they wanted. On the second day, this trend became even more violent. However, on the third day, there was news of a certain celebrity smoking something in a certain district in Beijing. After that, no one remembered who Jiang Hai was. Alright, it was that simple. As for the treatment in the United States, it was also very simple. Most of the tourists continued to enjoy themselves. After staying in the hospital for 2 days, they continued to enjoy themselves. There were some who were dissatisfied, and Winthrop did not treat them with a peaceful attitude. They directly found a lawyer for them. If they wanted to sue, they could sue them. If not, they would be sent back to their country. The travel agency also said that they would treat it as a wasted trip. They would refund the money to them and leave immediately. As for Jiang Hai, Winthrop, and the travel agency, these people did not expect them to be so firm. This was because in the past, there were many cases of tourists in China. However, the government usually kept the peace. Firstly, it was because China's policies cared for the disadvantaged. To the tourist destinations, tourists were the disadvantaged. Therefore, if a lawsuit was filed, the tourist destinations would definitely win. However, they would also have to compensate the tourists. But it was different in the United States. Everything here was about fairness. It was a society that did not rely on favors. If a rich man and a poor man fought a lawsuit, even if it received the attention of society and the judge sympathized with the poor man, the rich man would still win. This was the role of money. It was different from China. This was the law of the jungle. The weak were prey to the strong. Therefore, these tourists caused a ruckus for a long time. Many of them could not bring themselves to do anything. Hence, they left while cursing. However, these people left. For Jiang Hai and the rest, it did not affect them much. They continued doing what they were supposed to do. On the night of the carnival, Jiang Hai watched the Great Christmas War at home. He ate beef and drank beer. The storm outside had nothing to do with him. After the carnival, it was the New Year's holiday. After all, there were only 5 days left until the New Year. In the United States, Christmas was equivalent to the Chinese New Year. As for the New Year, it was more like the Yuanshao festival. Well, it could be said that. Therefore, although Christmas was over, the atmosphere in Winthrop was still there. Everyone was still immersed in the festive atmosphere. For Jiang Hai and the rest, the so-called festive period was just staying at home. In fact, it did not matter to Jiang Hai whether they celebrated the festive period or not. His daily life was similar to the festive period. When he was at home, Jiang Hai thought of the plane that he booked and Google's smart system. The plane needed to be installed slowly. Most importantly, it was the festive period. Jiang Hai was also on holiday. On the other hand, Google had to tailor a virtual program for Jiang Hai. Therefore, it would take some time. The plane would only be delivered in the middle of January, and the system would only be installed in March. Regarding this, Jiang Hai could only laugh. Since he had already booked the plane, he did not care about this period of time. Originally, he thought that he would spend the New Year quietly and then prepare to return to China. However, a sudden letter broke Jiang Hai's peaceful life. Looking at the letter in his hand, Jiang Hai felt that it was too low class. However, looking at the sealed letter sent from Washington, he shrugged and opened it. The first line was from the Federal Animal Husbandry Administration to Mr. Jiang Hai. Chapter 9:15. Is it necessary for me to come here? Sitting in a Lincoln limousine, Jiang Hai looked at the scenery outside and said to Moses Adams, who rushed over. To be honest, he didn't want to come here. Although he has never been to Washington, to be honest, he has no interest in the power center of the United States. Because he doesn't play politics, and he doesn't invest in power. What is he doing here? He wants to watch an NBA game, not the Wizards. Jiang Hai knows how bad the reputation of the Wizards is in China. Of course it's necessary, my dear boss. When he heard Jiang Hai's words, Moses Adams couldn't help but shake his head gently. Sometimes Jiang Hai doesn't care about these things. Other than that, he is really a good boss. But since he is a good boss, if he doesn't want to do something, then he can do it for him. Of course, this is not against Jiang Hai's wishes. For example, in this meeting, Jiang Hai is just lazy to come, not resisting. So Moses Adams will persuade him to come. If Jiang Hai belongs to the Republican Party, then he won't persuade him to come. Everyone knew that at the moment, at least in Washington, this was the territory of the Democratic Party. After their crazy president came to power, their goal was to set a new life goal for the grassroots. Otherwise, he wouldn't have been able to win against a woman with so much power in her hands, right? To be honest, if you want me to argue with those guys, would rather play with the dog at home. Looking at Moses Adams next to him, Jiang Hai shook his head and then said with a serious face. When they heard Jiang Hai say this, Azalina and Wallace Shelley, who were sitting in the front, also smiled, but they didn't say anything because they knew that Jiang Hai was telling the truth. Don't worry, boss, you can stay neutral here. Moses Adams also said with a smile when he heard what Jiang Hai said. Speaking of which, the reason why Jiang Hai came to Washington was mainly because of one thing. It was the letter he received that day. Jiang Hai's life is very simple, so he usually doesn't have an email account. He registered one because he wants to play Pokemon Go. He usually doesn't even go online. Therefore, it wasn't an easy task to find him for formal things. Generally, letters like this were sent through email. If they couldn't find an email, they could only send a letter. Although this action was a little low class, the things mentioned above were very high class. In addition to some polite words, this letter was mainly to invite Jiang Hai to attend the Animal Husbandry Summit organized by the United States Federal Bureau of Livestock on January 3 this year. Jiang Hai originally wanted to throw this letter away when he saw it. He has no interest in attending any summit. If he has the time, he can sleep with Qi and Ai Xiaoxi. But after learning that Jiang Hai had such a summit invitation, Qi Jie told Jiang Hai that he should actually go and take a look. Then Jiang Hai told Moses Adams about this matter, and he also advised Jiang Hai to go and take a look. After all, he is not just the owner of a small manor. He is now the supplier of about 30% of the top beef in the United States. He is a shareholder of Google. He is a herb man who does business with the whole world. These are his business cards. So he has the ability and qualifications to sit here. At the same time, he also needs to get to know his peers. After hearing Moses Adams' words, Jiang Hai thought for a moment. After celebrating the new year with the girls at home, he chartered a commercial jet yesterday and flew to Washington. He has no choice. Nowadays, people like him basically chartered flights everywhere. He rarely takes a big plane because he has to pay attention to his safety. After the plane landed in Washington, Jiang Hai stayed in a hotel arranged by the authorities for the night. This morning, he took a car arranged by the authorities to come here. In order to match the status of a top tycoon, the cars were all Lincoln. There is no need to be picky. Lincoln is a national car. Although it is not expensive in the United States, its status is very prominent. Just like the red flag in China, there is absolutely nothing wrong with using a red flag to entertain guests. No one can find fault with it. After sitting in the car, Jiang Hai and the others chatted. In fact, there must be a bug in the car, but Azalina and the others knew about it and did not set it up. After all, this is the capital of the United States. Sometimes, they would feel relieved if someone eavesdropped on them. Especially this time, the place they were going to was not an ordinary place, but the White House. The car slowly passed through the downtown area of Washington. Jiang Hai was also observing the capital of the United States. The full name of Washington is Washington, D.C. There are two places called Washington in the United States. One is the current special district, and the other is the state of Washington. Among them, Seattle, which has a great reputation in China, is the largest city there. However, this place has nothing to do with Washington. One is on the east coast, and the other is in the west. The distance is quite far. Now, the so-called Lake Washington, the University of Washington, the Olympic National Park, and so on refer to the state of Washington, not Washington. The attractions in Washington are the White House, Capitol Hill, the Lincoln Memorial, the Washington Monument, and so on. The most famous university here is George Washington University. As for the White House, everyone knows that it is the home and office of the President of the United States, but the White House does not belong to anyone. It belongs to the National Park Service. It is a part of the presidential park, but not all of it. Jiang Hai sat in the car and quickly shuttled through the city of Washington. After passing through the security gate, they entered the White House. Of course, before entering, they must be searched. Weapons are certainly not allowed, and bodyguards are not allowed. After all, this is the White House. Azalina and Wallace Shelley stayed in the car or went to the bodyguard lounge. Only Moses Adams can follow Jiang Hai in. After all, he can also give Jiang Hai ideas. The White House does not look big. From the outside, it looks like a 2.5-story building, but no one knows how many floors it has. As for the area, it was about the same as a local government in China. The size was limited. As for the interior decoration, it was also about the same as a local government. Well, Jiang Hai was just talking nonsense. How would he know about these things? In fact, the entire White House covers an area of 73,000 square meters. It is composed of the main building, the East Wing, and the West Wing. There is a total of 3 floors above. This is correct. There is a bottom floor, which is the basement. As for how deep it is, Jiang Hai does not know. After walking into the White House, Jiang Hai can see that it is not an exaggeration to describe this place with a guard every 3 steps. There were guards everywhere. Every one of them was wearing a suit and sunglasses. Their waists were bulging, and they were probably carrying guns. In addition to these people, there are many office workers who are also walking back and forth in the corridor. Jiang Hai can see that there are some primary school students who came to attend the White House in the distance. This is also a kind of education to cultivate their patriotism. A teacher is explaining the history of the White House in front of him. Looking at this scene, Jiang Hai does not know why, but he suddenly thinks of Scheidt Clive. It seems that when he first saw her, it was also a scene like this. But after thinking about it, he withdrew this thought. When she decided to stay away from him, it was already over for them. She can't accept that there are so many women around him, and he can't abandon these people to look for her. Just like what Jiang Hai said, he does not have the ability to choose. Only others can choose him. Sometimes, it is important to be domineering, but sometimes, if the other party is in pain, then it is another story. After following the person in front of them and leaving the main building, they can't go to the East Wing. That is where the meeting is. The main building is mainly where the president's family lives. Discussions and meetings are done in the East and West Wings. As Jiang Hai walked over, he saw some people in the distance. Some people are familiar, such as Luke Shawn and his son, who are walking not far in front of him. There is also John Malone, who used to be the godfather of television in the United States, who has just walked into a room. Outside the door of the room, there is a woman in a jumpsuit. Jiang Hai's eyesight is good, so he saw her at a glance. This woman is really attractive. She is very tall, about 1.8 meters, but she is wearing very high heels, which makes her look not much shorter than Jiang Hai. Compared to the nearby security guards, agents, she is quite different. With a delicate face and a tall and straight posture, it is undeniable that this is a very beautiful and elegant woman. At this time, although the woman is smiling, Jiang Hai feels that she doesn't seem to be very happy. Seeing Luke Shawn coming from a distance, she also took the initiative to greet him. After shaking hands, she watched Luke Shawn walk in. Next is Jiang Hai. Boss, pay attention to your words and actions. This is the daughter of the current President of the United States. Although he has gone out with Jiang Hai many times and knows that Jiang Hai is not a pig or a fool, Moses Adams still reminded him. He is very sure that Jiang Hai doesn't know who this person is, so it is necessary to tell Jiang Hai. Oh. Hearing his words, Jiang Hai was stunned for a moment, but he didn't show it. Instead, he slowly walked over. Seeing the woman in front of him reach out her hand, Jiang Hai also reached out his hand. After gently shaking it, Jiang Hai let go. Hello, Mr. Jiang Hai, I really didn't expect that you would come to this summit. Looking at Jiang Hai, the beautiful woman in front of him smiled and said to Jiang Hai. Hearing her words, Jiang Hai couldn't help smacking his lips. If I say that I didn't expect to come, would you believe me? Looking at the woman in front of him, Jiang Hai said softly. Hee hee, you are really humorous, please come in. Hearing Jiang Hai's words, the woman in front of him smiled softly and said to Jiang Hai. Chapter 9:16. Walking into the venue, Jiang Hai saw a huge oval round table. There were many boss chairs next to the table, and there was another chair behind each chair. There was a nameplate on the table in front. The meaning was very clear. The person who invited could sit in the front, and the person who followed could only sit in the back. As soon as he walked in, Jiang Hai saw Luke Shawn and John Malone, but old Malone was sitting in the first seat on the left. The title of the largest landlord in the United States was not a joke. Luke Shawn was sitting in the fifth seat on the right. When they saw Jiang Hai coming, they all nodded to Jiang Hai as a greeting. Jiang Hai also smiled and nodded. He looked for his seat, but looking at his position, Jiang Hai could not help but twitch his mouth. His seat was really at the back. It was the second last seat on the left. The total number of people who came here for the meeting added up to more than 20 people. Jiang Hai's seat was very far away. Although he did not know much about these things, he also knew that the farther the seat of the meeting was from the seat of honor, the lower the position of the official. Although Jiang Hai was not an official, it also meant that his position in the hearts of these officials was lower. However, the dissatisfaction only lasted for a moment. Because he originally wanted to come here to do nothing, he did not care. Walking here, Jiang Hai sat down directly, and Moses Adams sat in the chair behind him. At the same time, he took out an assembled laptop and prepared to record today's meeting content. This was also what the other followers were doing. Hello, are you Jiang Hai? After Jiang Hai sat down, people came one after another. Soon, someone sat next to Jiang Hai. On his left, which was the third last seat, was a bald man who looked very proud. He just glanced at Jiang Hai and did not speak anymore. Jiang Hai was not interested in this guy who looked like Professor X, but on his right, which was the last seat, was a white man about 30 years old. It was not easy to get to this position at 30 years old. Jiang Hai had a golden finger, so he did not count. After sitting down, the man glanced at Jiang Hai, then asked Jiang Hai with a bright smile. Oh, hello, Mr. Boggs. Hearing this person's question, Jiang Hai also replied, but he did not know who this person was. After glancing at this person's name tag, Jiang Hai knew that he was called Terry Boggs, but he didn't know what he did. It's normal that you don't know me. Let me introduce myself. My name is Terry Boggs. I just bought a piece of land in Mexico last July and started a livestock business. Hearing Jiang Hai's hesitation, the man named Boggs also laughed, then took the initiative to extend his hand and introduced himself to Jiang Hai. Oh, Jiang Hai. I bought a small manor in Winthrop. Hearing his words, Jiang Hai also shook his hand and introduced himself. In fact, there were almost no people here who didn't know Jiang Hai. Everyone knew about him, but very few people knew about him. After all, last year's forage incident caused a lot of commotion. I know you, brother. Your forage, TSK. To be honest, if it weren't for the fact that my target is only the middle and low-end markets, I would have definitely participated in your forage sale last time. Hearing Jiang Hai's words, Terry Boggs also laughed and said. Hearing that he wanted to make friends with him, Jiang Hai was also bored, so he chatted with him. But after chatting, Jiang Hai found that in terms of pure strength, he seemed to be the weakest among all the people present. This had nothing to do with money. The people who attended the livestock summit here only looked at how much land you had and how many cattle you had. It was that simple. Excluding the area of Shanghai, Jianghai's land was less than 27,000 acres in total. It was 160,000 acres, or 110 square kilometers. This seemed not small to Jianghai, but in fact, Jianghai's territory was already bigger than the town of Winthrop. There were 45,000 beef cattle, 30,000 Angus cattle, 5,000 Limousin cattle, 5,000 Charolais cattle, and 5,000 shorthorn cattle. But here, his numbers, could only be This Terry Boggs beside him only had a ranch in the state of Mexico. Big or small? 72,000 acres, a total of 250,000 cattle. With this kind of strength, he had to sit at the back. The big bald man next to Jianghai had 120,000 acres of land in Montana and Wyoming, and a total of 800,000 cattle. Only people with this kind of strength were qualified to attend such a conference. The United States was a big country in animal husbandry. The value of animal husbandry accounted for 48% of the total agricultural output, almost 50%. In other words, grains, vegetables, and fruits were equal to meat. The United States beef cattle industry was the world's #1. The states with more than 1 million beef cattle in the United States accounted for 70% of the total beef cattle in the United States. Texas alone had 14 million beef cattle in 2003, but it only accounted for less than 15% of the total beef cattle in the United States at that time. Kansas and Nebraska were also states with a large number of beef cattle. There were also Oklahoma, California, Missouri, South Dakota, Iowa, Wisconsin, and Colorado. These were the top 10 states with the most beef cattle in the United States. But now everyone knew that Montana had risen to the top. Now that the United States had opened the Wuxia and Asian markets, the beef cattle in the United States would definitely not be less than 200 million. As for Wuxia, there were less than 70 million beef cattle in the United States. In 2013, there were only 68 million beef cattle, and Wuxia had a population of 1.3 billion. In addition, the slaughter rate of beef cattle was not as high as in the United States, and the production of meat was not as high as in the United States. The population was more than 4 times higher, so it was no wonder that beef was so expensive in the United States. Production decided everything, right? They had more than 20 million cows, and the milk production was more than 150 million tons. There were 300 million people in the United States, and each person had about 500 kilograms of milk. If they drank 1 kilogram of milk every day, they would have to waste more than 100 kilograms. So it was no wonder that the prices in the United States were cheap. It was really because the United States could not afford it. In this regard, Jianghai could only shrug. It seemed that he was really a junior. Since that was the case, Lindley decided to follow his original plan to the end. Actually, it wasn't a bad choice to stay here. After chatting with Terry Boggs for a while, an official walked in. Everyone was silent. They looked at the official and waited for the summit to begin. Hello, everyone. My name is Biyao Kristen. I am the current Deputy Director of the Federal Animal Husbandry Department. You can call me Biyao. It is an honor to meet all of you here today. Seeing that everyone had quieted down, the Caucasian man in his 40s in front of him began to speak seriously. But to be honest, in Wuxia, the Deputy Director of the National Animal Husbandry Department, oh my God, even the most powerful animal husbandry owner in the world would have to kneel down and lick his boots. After all, this was the person who was in charge of them. But in the United States, especially in the eyes of more than 20 people, officials were just that. In the United States, they did not fight for power. In the United States, the government did not fight for power. In the eyes of the rich people in the United States, these officials were just that. They did not dare to cause trouble for them. This was the reality. There were so many parties in the United States. This was not a joke. There were 4 parties participating in the election alone. Although it was basically a battle between the Republican Party and the Democratic Party. But there were hundreds of people who had the votes of the Senate. These forces were intertwined. In fact, it felt a bit like the Ming Dynasty. In the Wuxia, the officials were basically trained by businessmen in Jiangsu, Zhejiang, and Guangdong. After they became officials, their main purpose was to seek benefits for the business class on their side. The most famous Donglin Party came about in this way. If there were benefits, they would rush to the front. If there were no benefits, they would run away. When the Qing dynasty came, they just needed to change the emperor. They did not care. This was the current situation in the United States. But what was different from the late Ming dynasty was that the businessmen in the late Ming dynasty were involved in things like food, salt, and cloth. These businessmen in the United States were involved in the arms trade. That's why they liked to fight. Now that the topic was over, the main point of this conversation was to say that a deputy bureau chief would not dare to provoke people like Jianghu. That's why the people in the meeting room did not seem to care about what he said. Some of them were even using their hands to send messages. Only the people who brought along the meeting room would take note of what he said seriously. The purpose of this meeting was not much different from the meetings in China. First, they will look at the stock of livestock in the US and the situation of the livestock industry. Were cows, sheep, pigs, etc. Were they doing well? Next, they will look at the future and see if the US can maintain its reputation as the world's strongest livestock country. The most important thing was to discuss the price of meat. The price of meat was different in every state. That's why the prices of meat were different in every state. It was just like China. If some places produce meat, the meat will be cheaper. If some places do not produce meat, the meat will be more expensive if it was imported from other places. Just like Bing City's vegetables. It was still okay in summer, but it was very expensive in winter. Why? It was because it was winter, and the vegetables could not be grown. They could only be transported from the south. The transportation cost was also included, and the vegetables were more expensive. Chapter 9:17. After that, everyone started to talk about the same things. Although the prices of beef, pork, mutton, etc. are different in different states, they need to set the prices first. Wuxia had suffered a huge loss about 10 years ago because of this. Wuxia is different from the United States. In the United States, beef and mutton are the main food. Although pork is the second largest in the world, most of the pork is used for canned food, sausages, fried pork chops, etc. Other than that, only Wuxia immigrants in the United States will buy and eat these things. But in Wuxia, pork is the main meat. But the farmers in Wuxia are very scattered. Wuxia's animal husbandry is done on a free-range basis. That means cows, pigs, and goats are all reared in the villages. It is not easy to count them, and that's why the statistics were not done for a year. Pork is very cheap. Jianghu remembers that year, pork is only 4 to 5 renminbi per catty. Even vegetables are more expensive than meat. After that, everyone knew that pork was no longer profitable. The next year, no one raised pigs anymore. This time, the price of pork instantly shot up. It more than tripled and was even sold for more than 20 yuan. At that time, everyone saw how the pork had grown. Many people went back to rearing pigs, and the price of pork dropped again. The amount of money lost during this period is shocking. Most importantly, no one is confident anymore. After that, the government started to regulate the prices and check the stocks. Although they are unable to get the exact figures, they want to know more than 70% of the stocks and how much they can produce next year. This will make it easier for them to regulate the prices. The prices of pork are different in different places, and there is a range of regulation. For example, if the average price is 15 renminbi, plus or minus 2 renminbi, then the price of pork will be between 13 renminbi and 17 renminbi. This is why Jianghu and the rest are attending this summit. The American government wants to know how much beef they have in stock this year and how much they can produce next year. Then, they will set the prices. That's right. The prices are set this way. It is different from the experts and professors. This is how the prices are set. It was just like the annual trends. In fact, it was just a few major brands and designers coming together to research what colors they liked recently, and what companies were going to launch. Then, they would integrate and seek common ground while reserving differences. Then, they would discuss and come up with this year's trend. As for the price of beef, it was the same. However, this had nothing to do with Jianghu, because Jianghu himself did not come into contact with these low to medium civilian markets. He only sold high-end goods. He did not care how much preferred, standard, or commercial beef you sold. He only sold those starting at $400. You can do whatever you want. If you want to buy, then buy. If you don't want to buy, then forget it. It was precisely because of this that in the eyes of the traditional livestock owners, Jianghu was a freak. A small farmer with only 45,000 head of cattle could squeeze into their ranks. Wasn't it all because of Jianghu's reputation? But when it comes to strength, these people look down on Jianghu. This is also why the bald man beside Jianghu looks down on him. He has 800,000 cows. If he earns 1,000 renminbi per cow, he can earn 800 million renminbi per cow. Moreover, he is not worried that he will not be able to sell his cows one day. As long as there are people in the United States, they will eat beef. It is as simple as that. And Jianghu's high-end market will disappear at any time. From their point of view, Jianghu's current situation can be summed up in 4 words: his foundation is not stable. Therefore, they are not interested in Jianghu, except for Jianghu's pasture. But at the same time, Jianghu is not interested in them. 1,000 renminbi per cow? He will not do this kind of business. Under such circumstances, it is impossible for him to listen to what they are saying. So, he just scrolls through his phone in boredom. Fortunately, these people are not very talkative. After chatting for about an hour and a half, they have reached an agreement. It is basically the same as what Jianghu knows. If there is a change, it means that the status of the United States in the world has changed. Because these things come with the USD. As long as the USD is still strong and is still the number 1 currency in the world, then everything will be fine. After the discussion, the people here did not say that they are going to treat them to a meal. After the discussion, everyone can leave. I told you. I am redundant. I don't even know what they are talking about. As they walked out, Jianghu said to Moses Adams. Moses Adams had seen a lot of big shots today. These big shots were not people that he could come in contact with at his current level. Of course, he was just seeing them. Moses Adams had seen a lot of big shots today. He had seen a lot of big shots today. These big shots all had their own personal lawyers, so they wouldn't use him. However, it was good for him to gain some knowledge and scare people. Moreover, as long as the hoe is used well, there is no corner that cannot be dug. Cough, of course, he is not just saying it. Boss, you don't know how many people want to attend this summit every year. Hearing Jianghu's words, Moses Adams also calmed down and looked at Jianghu with some helplessness. He has to admit that Jianghu is really casual sometimes. Really? Why don't I know? Hearing his words, Jianghu curled his lips and said with some disdain. Of course, for example, me. But before Moses Adams could answer, Terry Boggs, who had just greeted Jianghu, came over and said with a smile. Hearing him interrupt, Moses Adams took a step back. This is not the time for him to speak, and Jianghu shrugged when he heard his words. In fact, if you knew me earlier, you wouldn't have to go through so much trouble. I would have just given you my seat. Hearing this man's words, Jianghu also said casually. It seems that he really doesn't care about his position today. You are really humorous. I don't know if you have anything to do in a while. If not, I will treat you to a meal. Hearing Jiang Hai's words, Terry Boggs couldn't help but say with a smile, "Oh. Okay." Hearing his words, Jiang Hai froze for a moment, then nodded. He always felt that this guy's purpose of looking for him was not pure. Instead of letting him hold it in, it was better to let him say it. Jiang Hai is not someone who can't refuse others. In fact, he can see that it seems that Terry Boggs is not the only one who wants to look for him now. Oh. Oh, okay. Hearing Jiang Hai agree so readily, Terry Boggs was a little confused. When he came, he also inquired about Jiang Hai and knew that Jiang Hai is a very unsociable person. He doesn't want to go to parties, nor does he want to go out to play. His only hobby is to stay at home. As for the question of being lecherous, which man is not lecherous? What's more, in his opinion, Jiang Hai is a lecherous person with principles. So in his opinion, maybe Jiang Hai is a loner, not good at socializing, and a little introverted, so it is not an easy thing to invite him to a meal. But he didn't expect that when he opened his mouth, Jiang Hai would actually agree. In fact, he was right. It is not an easy thing to find Jiang Hai. Among the 20 people present, there are only 2 who are friends with Jiang Hai. One is Luke Shawn, and the other is John Malone. But these 2 have never hung out with Jiang Hai before. It is not that they don't want to, but Jiang Hai skipped over them every time. This time, the reason why Jiang Hai agreed to Terry Boggs's proposal was because he knew that if he didn't agree to one of them first, it wouldn't be easy to avoid the other people's dinner. Moreover, he would also offend others. Rather than that, it is better to directly agree to the first person who invited him. Secondly, Jiang Hai is really a little hungry now. The second point is definitely not the reason why he agreed. But in any case, Jiang Hai agreed. For Terry Boggs, this is a big deal. He immediately put on a smile and led Jiang Hai out of the White House. The other people who originally wanted to make friends with Jiang Hai, after seeing Jiang Hai and Terry Boggs leave, they couldn't help but frown and stop their footsteps. The people here can be said to be famous in the United States. They don't have the habit of taking the initiative to kiss ass with a warm face. After Jiang Hai and Terry Boggs left, they also got into their respective Lincoln cars. Then the 2 of them went to downtown Washington one after the other. Soon, they arrived at a high-end restaurant called George. What a mess of restaurants. Jiang Hai was too lazy to remember the names. After walking in, it was really a high-end Western restaurant. This person took Jiang Hai to a separate compartment. In addition, there were 3 tables specially prepared for their attendants, namely Moses Adams, Azalina, and Wallace Shelley on Jiang Hai's side. On his side, there was also an attendant and a driver from before. Everyone ate their own food, so the content of the conversation would not be leaked. "Come on, brother, the seafood here is great." After the 2 of them sat down, a waiter came over with 2 menus. Jiang Hai listened to him and took the menu with a smile. But when he opened the first page, he saw the words on it, "Top seafood from Winthrop's mysterious sea." For some reason, when Jiang Hai looked at this paragraph, he felt a little embarrassed and a little happy. Chapter 9:18. This restaurant was a very traditional French restaurant, but Jiang Hai didn't choose a set meal, but ordered individual dishes. French fried sole, Mexican spicy seafood platter with French bread, garlic cream cod soup with crab feet, crab meat salad. The main course was 10 brocade seafood rice and shrimp, crab shell seafood noodles, accompanied by some side dishes. Originally, Terry Boggs also wanted to order red wine, but Jiang Hai refused. He didn't want to drink that. If it was beer, it would be fine, but eating French food with beer, no matter how he thought about it, it didn't match very well. Soon after they ordered, a waiter brought their food. He had to admit that the seafood made by these French chefs was really good. Compared to the Chinese food made by Chia, it was good to eat this kind of Western food occasionally. Although Chia was very talented in cooking, after all, compared to these professionals, she was still a little lacking. But to be honest, Jianghu felt that the food made by Chiyo was very delicious, at least that was what he thought. After 30 days of eating, the dishes were very tasty. Foreigners didn't pay attention to talking when eating, so Jianghu and the others ate quickly and quietly. But when the rice and dishes were finished, and fruit salad and coffee were served, it was time to talk. After taking a sip of coffee, Terry Boggs looked at Jianghu. Jianghu knew that he was going to talk. I don't know the habits of Wuxia people very well. I prefer to be direct, so I'll ask Mr. Jiang directly. I don't know what Mr. Jiang thinks about the political parties in the United States. Looking at Jianghu, Terry Boggs said with a serious face. Cough, what? Hearing his words, Jianghu was stunned for a moment. Originally, he thought that this Terry Boggs was inviting him to a meal, at most, to ask him about the matter of the pasture. Whether it was to buy or not, Jianghu was mentally prepared. But now, it suddenly turned into a political issue, making Jianghu somewhat confused. He looked at Terry Boggs with a puzzled face. Oh, I said it very clearly. I want to ask you what you think about the political parties in the United States. Terry Boggs shrugged his shoulders at Jianghu's reaction and said with an indifferent look on his face. It was as if he was talking about today's potatoes, even though Jianghu and the others didn't order any potatoes at all. I'm a cattle farmer, and I'm Wuxia. I have no intention of changing my nationality, so I have no right to speak about the political system of the United States. Looking at Terry Boggs in front of him, Jianghu said seriously. The United States is a country of freedom of speech, so you don't have to be so restrained. But if you really don't want to say it, then listen to me. Do you know anything about the Liberal Party? Looking at Jianghu, Terry Boggs began to talk, but Jianghu didn't respond. It sounded like he was listening to Terry Boggs. Do you know Ainley? If he knew that Jianghu was a member of this kind of political party, he wouldn't have come to dinner. He had to remain neutral. And to be honest, there were too many political parties in the United States. Jianghu couldn't remember except for the two largest ones. The Liberal Party is the third largest political party in the United States. You also know that there are many political parties in the United States, such as the GC Party, the Progressive Party, the Labor Organization, the Farmers Association, and so on. There are more than a dozen of them, but only 4 can participate in the election. One is the current ruling Democratic Party, one is the Republican Party, one is the Independent Party, and the last one is our Liberal Party. Looking at Jianghu, Terry Boggs said excitedly. He didn't look like a fanatic. Our Liberal Party is currently the third largest political party in the United States, with a total of 200,000 registered voters and a total of 600 party members in public positions, including mayors, county officials, and so on. It can be said that our Liberal Party is also very powerful. Looking at Jianghu, Terry Boggs waved his arms excitedly and kept spitting saliva. Looking at him, Jianghu was already thinking about how to get away. It didn't seem good to leave after eating. Just as Jianghu was hesitating here, an old white man came from a distance. When he saw Jianghu and Terry Boggs sitting here, he quickly walked over. Seeing this man, Terry Boggs took the initiative to stand up. I hope I didn't disturb you. After the white man walked to the table, he smiled at Jianghu. Oh, no, we just finished eating. Hearing the white man's words, before Jianghu could speak, Terry Boggs spoke first. Then the white man didn't hesitate and sat directly opposite Jianghu. Jiang, let me introduce you, this is the leader of our party, Gary Johnson. Looking at the man in front of him, Terry Boggs said with a serious face. Hearing his name, Jianghu's mind turned a bit. Jianghu had some understanding of this person, not because he was a famous person, but because Jianghu wanted to open a manor in the United States at the very beginning. He once wanted to go to Mexico because the land there was the cheapest in a sense, but the auction house strongly recommended that place. According to them, the people there were very chaotic, and it was easy for drug lords to cross the border. It was very dangerous, so Jianghu gave up on that place. Plus, it was really not very good there. And this Gary Johnson was the governor of Mexico when Jianghu wanted to go there. Looking at Terry Boggs, he seemed to be from Mexico as well. So, Jianghu didn't believe that there wasn't some kind of dirty deal going on between the two of them. "Hello, Mr. Jianghu, I know you, I also know your beef, and I also know your fish and forage." Listening to the introduction, Gary Johnson also smiled and stretched out his hand and said to Jianghu, "Oh, hello." Although Jianghu was very reluctant to have anything to do with these people, he also stretched out his hand. "I don't know, Mr. Jiang, what do you think of our Liberal Party?" Looking at Jianghu, Gary Johnson also smiled and said, then he began to introduce the situation of his party, regardless of whether Jianghu understood or not. To put it bluntly, this party was actually a party formed by businessmen, advocating a system of complete freedom. For example, large-scale tax cuts, privatization of the social welfare system, elimination of government regulation of business, abolition of labor regulations such as minimum wage, and stop government interference in international trade. Protecting private property, minimizing the number of government officials, freedom of everything, no restrictions on defense, no regulation of firearms, opposing conscription, and stopping the ban of the so-called no victim, selling sex, driving without a license, buying, selling, and using drugs. Think about it. In this world, there was no regulation of firearms. Ordinary people could even buy missiles. Workers didn't have the minimum labor protection. That is to say, the boss could pay as much as he wanted. No one could control it. There was a maximum limit, but no minimum limit. Selling sex on the street was legal. Driving without a license was not a problem as long as there was no car accident. Buying, selling, and using drugs could also be done in broad daylight. As long as no one died, no one would care. This kind of world, damn, what kind of freedom was this? This was clearly the end of the world. But for businessmen, this was a paradise. Unfortunately, Jianghu was not a pure businessman. So after he finished talking about the Liberal Party, Jianghu did not have a good impression of this party. Without rules, nothing could be accomplished. Although he also hated being bound, there was no absolute freedom in this world. Jianghu always believed that human nature was evil and selfish. If he really lived in such a lawless world, then it could only be the end of the world. And Jianghu did not stay in such a world for long enough. So he did not say a word to their words. After they finished, Jianghu left. For them to let Jianghu join them, Jianghu just smiled. He was not crazy. It seems that the situation is not very smooth. After watching Jianghu get in the car and leave, Terry Boggs said to Gary Johnson next to him with some discouragement. To be honest, the reason why they spent so much effort to get Terry Boggs in was mainly for Jianghu. Because they knew that Jianghu had that kind of pasture in his hands. If they could control Jianghu, or control that kind of pasture, it would be extremely beneficial for the development of their party. Controlling the beef was equivalent to controlling the mouths of all Americans. And Jianghu's pasture was the key to controlling the beef. Jianghu did not have the intention to make this thing big, but they did. But now it seemed that their efforts were useless because Jianghu was really not interested in their party. Now that it is not smooth, it does not mean that it will not be smooth forever. I believe he will understand. Looking at the leaving Jianghu, Gary Johnson smiled. They could not only make these preparations to come to Jianghu, but they thought that Jianghu was too simple. Is Jianghu that kind of person who is easy to deal with? At least he did not think so. It was too dangerous. I actually met a pair of lunatics. Jianghu, who got in the car, could not help but wipe his sweat at this time and said helplessly. Hearing Jianghu's words, Moses, Adams and the others laughed. There were quite a lot of lunatics in the United States. By the way, boss, where are we going now? Back to Boston? After laughing, Wallace turned her head and asked Jianghu. Chapter 9:19. Well, let's go back. I'm really uncomfortable here. Hearing Wallace Shelley's words, Jianghu also nodded. He really didn't get along with this place. To be honest, he wasn't very comfortable in Washington. Okay, I'll inform the crew. Hearing Jianghu say that he was going back, Wallace Shelley also smiled and picked up her phone to make a call. But before she could call, Jianghu's phone rang first. Jianghu picked up the phone and looked at it. The caller was no one else but Pra Walton. Although Jianghu and Pra Walton were still in regular contact, they hadn't been in contact for a while. After all, Pra Walton was also in the Walton family. There were many things to do at the end of the year. Summary, accounting, annual meeting. A big company naturally wouldn't be like Jianghu's. They would just gather together, have a meal, and give out money. They had a lot of things to do. Just the problem of layoffs or new employees next year would require a lot of meetings. Fortunately, Pra Walton was now leading Sam's Club alone because of her relationship with Jianghu. She had the final say in everything, and no one would intervene in this. The Walton family was very good at this. Although Pra Walton's uncle and her father had been competing for the management rights of Warlima, fortunately, they were all serious businessmen. They weren't the kind of businessmen who would fight with each other for power. Their essence was to make money. Whoever could make more money for everyone would be the hero. It was that simple. Therefore, Pra Walton's current position was very stable. Because Jianghu could make her a lot of money, although it was far worse than the head office. After all, Jianghu was only taking the high-end route, but the money he earned was real money. Hello, Pra, why did you call me at this time? Are you done with the things over there? In a flash, Jianghu had already picked up the phone, and then said to Pra Walton with a smile. Hee, are you in Washington? Hearing Jianghu's voice, Pra Walton on the other side of the phone chuckled and said. Hearing her words, Jianghu was stunned. He didn't tell anyone that he went to Washington. He glanced at Wallace Shelley and Azalina in front of him. These two didn't seem like people who would reveal his location. He looked out of the window. The car speeding didn't seem to be seen. What the hell is this? How do you know? Although he had some doubts, Jianghu was good, he didn't know what, so he asked Pra Walton. He really didn't know how she knew he was here. I saw you on the White House's reception list today. Hearing Jianghu say this, Pra Walton also said with a smile. Hearing her words, Jianghu was even more confused. She can see the White House's reception list? I'm also in Washington, but it's different from your meeting. I've been here for 3 days. At the beginning of the year, this year is also the first year of the new president, so everything has to be friendly. We can only wait here. Ignoring Jianghu's doubts, Pra Walton couldn't help but sigh, and then said to Jianghu, she didn't like meetings either. Haha, then you're miserable. Are you going to stay here for a while? Hearing what she said, Jianghu asked her. Well, I'll stay for 4 days. Are you in a hurry to go back? If you don't have anything to do, come and stay with me for a while. I'll open a few PA for you to play. Hearing Jianghu's words, Pra Walton said with a smile. Hearing her words, Jianghu couldn't help but raise his eyebrows, then shook his head. Recently, the investigation was very strict. He didn't want his story to end like this, but although he didn't have to open a PA, it's not bad to stay with Pra Walton for a while. Forget about PA, it doesn't matter if I stay here with you for a while. Where are you? I'll find you. Hearing Pra Walton's voice, Jianghu said to her with a smile. Hearing Jianghu say that he can come and accompany her, Pra Walton also told him her location. Maybe in order to entertain the people of the summit, these people stayed in the same hotel. It's the same hotel where Jianghu stayed, but on a different floor. Jianghu came last night. If he came earlier, he might have met Pra Walton. After returning to the hotel, Jianghu asked Moses Adams. He still had something to deal with, so he left first, and Jianghu also booked his room for 4 more days. This year's Lunar New Year was at the end of January, and Jianghu still had a lot of time. He was also thinking about whether he should bring everyone back this year. This year, there were 5 people who will definitely return to China. Jianghu, Qi Jia, Qia, Ai Xiaoxi, and Feng Yinchen. Ai Xiaoxi will go back to her hometown in Lu Province for the Lunar New Year. After the Lunar New Year, she will go to the capital to meet Jianghu. The other 4 will naturally go back to Bing City, but Jianghu was thinking about whether he should bring Delina, Marian, Azalina, and Aphrodite back. After all, they haven't been to their hometown yet. Now that they are following him, he should go and have a look. Although there is a lot of snow in Winthrop, it's still different from Bing City. But where to live after returning is a problem. It seems that he needs to buy a big house in Bing City. Of course, this is just an idea. When he goes back, he will naturally discuss it with the girls. However, based on their obedient attitude towards Jianghu Yan, there shouldn't be any problems. As for Pra Walton's place, it doesn't matter if they stay for 4 more days. After adding 4 more days to his room, Jianghu went to Pra Walton's room. As for Azalina and Wallace Shelley, they were very perceptive and didn't follow him. He gently knocked on the door. Not long after, there was a sound of footsteps from inside. With a click, Pra Walton appeared in front of Jianghu. At this time, she was wearing a tank top, and some of her protruding parts could be seen clearly. She was wearing only a pair of hot pants. She was really quite seductive, but Jianghu's expression was not very good. This is just me, so I've seen it. What if it's someone else? This woman is too careless. Wow, you came back so quickly. Give me a kiss. Seeing Jianghu standing outside the door, Pra Walton couldn't help but cry out in surprise. Then she threw herself into Jianghu's arms and kissed Jianghu's lips directly. Feeling her naughty tongue, Jianghu also fought back. At the same time, he hugged her and walked into the door. After closing the door, his hands were a little naughty. It is said that after a long separation, Xing Sheng is a newlywed. Pra Walton asked Jianghu to come, first, to accompany her, and second, to cough. I say, can you not be so arrogant? Just as the temperature between Jianghu and Pra Walton gradually rose, a voice sounded in the room. Hearing this voice, Jianghu was also startled. He immediately jumped away and looked at the source of the voice. As a result, he found that there were 2 women sitting in the room. Jianghu also knew one of them. It was the woman who was responsible for receiving people at the door when they were in the White House. However, Moses Adams said that she was the daughter of the current president. Jianghu had always kept a respectful distance from such a woman. And the other woman, to be honest, was relatively flat. She seemed to be the oldest among these people. She had blonde hair, and her upper body was not very plump. There was always a faint disdain in the corner of her eyes. In terms of Jianghu's aesthetics, this woman was actually not very good-looking. As for the aesthetics of Americans, who knew? Let me introduce you. This is Paris Hilton, one of the heirs of the Hilton Hotel. This is Ivan Trump, the daughter of our current president. Hearing these 2 people, Pra Walton also walked to Jianghu's side with a smile, as if she didn't care about letting people know her relationship with Jianghu. She just took Jianghu's arm and said with a smile, "We just met today, didn't we, Mr. Jiang?" Hearing Pra Walton's introduction, Ivan Trump, who was still wearing the clothes she wore this morning, also stood up and said to Jianghu with a smile, "Oh, hello." Hearing her words, Jianghu also responded. As for the woman on the other side, Jianghu didn't know her at first, but when he heard the name, he basically knew her. Paris Hilton, America's famous prodigal and socialite. She and her good friend, Kim Kardashian, were so famous. Firstly, it was because of their wealth. Secondly, it was because of some of the titles they had filmed. Alright, actually, it wasn't titles. It was just a video. But it was really a big deal. Jianghu also glanced at it, but to be honest, he had no interest in these women. It was better to find those professional women than these guys. At least they wouldn't cheat you, right? You're Jianghu. I always hear Prawalton talk about you, but this is the first time we meet. Seeing Jiang Hai looking over, Paris Hilton also stood up and said to Jiang Hai in a tone with a hint of disdain. Hearing her words, Jiang Hai also laughed. Talking to such a guy, you will lose if you care about her tone. Well, we won't disturb you from resuing. Prawalton remembered that she had to attend yesterday morning. Hearing Paris Hilton's words, the atmosphere in the room dropped a little. Ivan Trump couldn't help but smile and ease the situation. Chapter 920. Hearing what Ivan Trump said, Paris Hilton didn't say much. She just took a look at Jiang Hai and left. As for Prawalton, she also waved to the two and motioned them to take care. After the two left the room and locked the door, Jiang Hai hugged Prawalton's waist and picked her up. Of course, the bodies of the two were still tightly attached to each other. Wow, he, next is our time. Do you want to go out and play first, or? Looking at Jiang Hai, Prawalton first exclaimed, then laughed. Her long legs were directly in the air, hugging Jiang Hai's waist, looking at Jiang Hai with charming eyes. Hearing her words, Jiang Hai also chuckled. Yes, you can order. Looking at Prawalton in front of him, Jiang Hai also said seriously. Have you had lunch? Hearing Jiang Hai's words, Prawalton asked Jiang Hai with a smile. Yes. Hearing her suddenly talk about lunch, Jiang Hai was stunned for a moment, but he answered truthfully. Then let's do some exercise to digest first. Hearing what she said, Jiang Hai still didn't know what she meant. He directly carried her to the bed, threw her on the big bed, and then threw himself on it. Because of some policies, it is impossible to describe the details after the fight between the two in detail. For a while, only clothes and other things could be seen flying everywhere. After a long while, Prawalton's voice, accompanied by a smell, began to drift in the room. This sound lasted about an hour before it stopped. After about half an hour, it rang again. It had to be said that 30 was like a wolf, 40 was like a tiger. At this age, although Paula Walton had a group of girls to help her relieve her loneliness, her needs in that aspect were obviously not something that could be easily satisfied by women. Being together with Jiang Hai was the most interesting thing. Stop it, or we'll have to do it again in a while. Patting her butt, Jiang Hai said to Prawalton. Let's do it, I've only heard of tired cows, have you heard of plowed fields? Hearing Jiang Hai's words, Prawalton also raised her head and said with a smile, but when she said it, her eyes were a little evasive, because now she is just trying to be brave. She knows her situation, if she does it again, her body may not be able to stand it. Well, go take a shower, did you say you want to take me out to play? Hearing her words, Jiang Hai also knew that she could not stand it now, so he said to her with a smile. Hearing what Jiang Hai said, Prawalton's mouth also raised. I want you to take me out. Not knowing when it started, Prawalton, who was originally a strong woman, was like a kitten in front of Jiang Hai. She learned to please Jiang Hai and learned to act coquettishly. Jiang Hai did not have any discomfort with this. After retreating, he picked up the lazy Prawalton next to him, walked into the bathroom next to him, and stepped into the prepared bathtub. No one knew what happened when the two took a shower, but this shower also took more than half an hour. After coming out, the two put on their clothes again and were ready to leave the hotel, but when they put on their clothes, Prawalton was still not prepared to wear a vest, but under Jiang Hai's strong request, she wore it. It had to be said that in fact, women in the United States really did not like to wear vests, and the girls in Jiang Hai's manner were the same. After the two went out, Prawalton specially went to the hotel to rent a car. Of course, after they came out, 2 cars followed them. One was driven by Azalina and Wallace Shelley, and the other was to protect Prawalton. Of course, they did not appear in Jiang Hai's sight, but Jiang Hai knew that they were following him. Are you here to attend the livestock summit? After getting in the car, Prawalton asked Jiang Hai while driving. The relationship between the two was actually quite harmonious. If the relationship between the two was to be said, it was somewhat unclear. If they were lovers, they were not. What if they were friends? They were closer than friends. They rolled on the bed sheet as soon as they met. How could there be such a friend? But it was not right to say that they were lovers, because the two had no plans to be together. Usually, they were busy with their own things. And it was not right to say that they were friends. After all, the two were partners, so the relationship between the two was very complicated. However, Jiang Hai would not point this out. After all, he felt that it was difficult to deal with the women in his manner now. Well, I came to attend the livestock summit. I played with my mobile phone there for an hour and a half, and then the meeting was over. Facing Pulla Walton, Jiang Hai didn't hide his attitude. He didn't like to attend the meeting. He really didn't want to go. Hee, by the way, only the livestock summit called you? What about the fishing industry? Hearing Jiang Hai's words, Pra Walton first smiled and then said to Jiang Hai. In her opinion, Jiang Hai was now walking on two legs. Not only did his beef sell well, but his fish also sold well. The livestock summit called him, but what about the fishing industry? Maybe I will be called when the summit in Massachusetts is held, but it is a national summit. Obviously, I have nothing to do with it. How much can my fish farm produce in a year? Those who can come are absolute tycoons, and the most important thing is that the price they set is the price of middle and low-level consumption. My things are not sold according to this price. Shrugging his shoulders, Jiang Hai said with a serious face. Hearing Jiang Hai's words, Pra Walton also nodded. This was indeed the case. Jiang Hai was qualified to attend the livestock summit mainly because of his forage. With Jiang Hai's forage, he had a great reputation in the livestock industry, so he was called to attend the summit. As for the fishing industry, Jiang Hai's fish was an astronomical figure for some ordinary people, but for the Federation, it was just that. Jiang Hai's fish production in a year was only dozens of tons. Although dozens of tons were worth billions, the quantity was not that high. For example, in addition to Jiang Hai's Atlantic cod, just in Massachusetts, the annual production was more than 2 to 3 million tons. Jiang Hai's small fish were really not that important, and he did not intend to promote it like he did with his forage. Therefore, it was inevitable that the fishing industry did not value Jiang Hai. If Jiang Hai was not in Boston, but in Canada, he was destined to be noticed by others. But now, at least the people in the fishing industry would not treat Jiang Hai as a real fishing tycoon. The two chatted while driving. Not long after, they arrived at their first destination of the day, the U.S. Capitol. The U.S. Capitol, Washington Monument, and Lincoln Memorial were all on the same line. They were next to each other, so basically, they would find a place and play with these three places. But they had to admit that the attractions in Washington were really not that interesting. There was no scenery, no interesting places, and no historical places. The most important thing was that it was a place for Americans to teach patriotism. Unlike the imperial capital in China, there was the Forbidden City and the Great Wall standing there, giving the city a sense of history. On the other hand, in Washington, there was nothing. If it wasn't for Pulla Walton saying that he wanted to go out for a walk, Jiang Hai might have already boarded the plane back to Winthrop. But sometimes, going out did not mean going to the attractions. It was also very important to have someone accompanying you. It seemed that Jiang Hai and Pra Walton had not really gone out for a walk, and she also enjoyed the time with Jiang Hai. After the two parked the car in front of the Capitol, they walked forward. The Capitol was where the U.S. Senate and House of Representatives met. As everyone knew, the president's words were not that important in the U.S. There were two places where people had the right to reject the president's proposals, the House of Representatives and the Senate. There were a total of 435 seats in the House of Representatives, and the members changed every 2 years. It was the highest level that ordinary people could come into contact with. In addition, there was also the Senate, commonly known as the Upper House, with a total of 100 seats. They were the core of the U.S. power. The strength of each party and each force was mainly reflected by the president and the number of seats in the upper and lower houses. Although the Republican Party lost the election last year. However, everyone knew that the Republican Party was still the most powerful faction in the House of Representatives. This was because they represented elite politics. Those who supported this party were all rich and knowledgeable people, the so-called elites. On the other hand, the Democratic Party was made up of old-fashioned farmers and nouveau riche. This could be seen from the fact that during the election, the wealthiest areas in the Northeast and Southwest supported the Republican Party, while the poorest areas in the middle supported the Democratic Party. This was the political system of the U.S. The Capitol was also the place where most people gathered to protest. Chapter 921. Jianghu and Pra Walton walked all the way here. In the beginning, everything was fine. It was like a park. The greenery was good. Although it was winter, the air was good. There was no beautiful scenery along the way, but there was nothing wrong with it. But when they reached the Capitol building, the atmosphere changed. There were 2 cordons at the entrance of the Capitol building. One was for cars, the other for people. The cordons were divided into areas where many people gathered. They held all kinds of signs in their hands and shouted loudly. The police also gathered in the distance, but they were obviously used to it. They just stood there and chatted. Their eyes glanced over from time to time to prevent people from crossing the cordons. Jianghu was very familiar with these people's actions. Protesting. There was a difference between the United States and Wuxia. That was the degree of understanding of protesting. In Wuxia, protesting was called making a crowd. The leader would be arrested. Of course, it could also be called a room. Alright, he was going to get caught for that. But in the United States, protesting was almost a daily occurrence. Eating, sleeping, and protesting were all Americans' spare time activities. This was because in America, protesting was a simple matter. Just look at the state and city government offices. There would always be people protesting with signs. Of course, if you crossed the cordon, then it would be a different story. You could just sit there quietly or shout, and no one would care. And Americans would often protest for all kinds of things. There were many different kinds of protests. Even if some things were illegal, they would still protest. For example, the things that Jianghu saw, there were quite a few, for example, legalizing professional women. Currently, in the United States, professional women were legal in only one state, Nevada, where the gambling city of Las Vegas was located. It was illegal in all other states. However, there were a lot of skirting the boundaries. For example, in California, it was allowed to open an erotic dance club, and it was also allowed to allow erotic women to perform the dances to customers without touching them, but it was not allowed to have monetary transactions. So basically, it was borderline issues. That was why there were many professional women coming every day to legalize such things. They were both earning money and sacrificing their bodies. Why couldn't it be legal? Sometimes, some extreme people would directly run out naked and then be arrested by the police. This kind of thing was not rare. Other than that, there were many other slogans. For example, let's legalize it. The reason was that it was already legal in the Netherlands. There were also black people holding signs saying that black people's sentences should be different from white people's because this was their culture. There are also white people holding signs saying that they want people of color to get out of the United States. Jianghu is very curious. Won't they be beaten? There were also some who talked about how the Jews were treated, and there were also some who said that the Chinese did not have a high social status. It was a mess, divided into more than a dozen pieces. There were all kinds of slogans, but the police did not care. This was also a characteristic of the United States, freedom of speech. If you were in the United States and scolded a black person in front of him, you were a black person, or scolded a yellow person in front of him, you were a yellow-skinned monkey. Such targeted words were a crime of racial discrimination. However, if you wrote these words on a board and held it up in protest, no one would care because you were not counting on anyone. That was the way it was in the United States. If a group attacked another group, they would not care. If an individual attacked another individual, that would be a crime. Jiang Hai took a look, curled his lips, and left. He did not have a good impression of these people who had nothing better to do. After passing by the Capitol building, Jiang Hai and the others came to the Washington Monument. This Washington Monument was built to commemorate the first President of the United States, George Washington. It was built in 1833, but because of the Civil War, it was stopped for 22 years. It was restarted in 1876. It was completed in 1884, and since then, it had become a landmark in the United States. The monument was in the shape of an obelisk. You could take the elevator or climb up from inside. Through 8 small windows, you could see the whole city of Washington, Virginia, Maryland, and the Potomac River. The inner wall of the monument was inlaid with 188 commemorative stones donated by individuals, groups, and countries around the world. One of the Chinese commemorative stones was donated by the Manchurian government. However, these were all encyclopedias, so Jiang Hai just mentioned them casually. Anyway, he was not interested in these things. When they arrived at the Washington Monument, Jiang Hai and Pra Walton found a place to sit down and rest for a while. They were not interested in climbing this thing. They just wanted to take a picture outside. However, just as Jiang Hai and Pra Walton were about to leave and go to the last attraction, the Lincoln Memorial, Azalina suddenly came from a distance. Pra Walton also knew Azalina, so he was a little surprised to see her now. What's wrong? Seeing Azalina coming over, Jiang Hai looked at her with some doubts. She had been in a state of disappearance just now. Now that she suddenly appeared, there must be something wrong. Someone is following you. Azalina whispered to Jiang Hai after glancing at him. Hearing this, Jiang Hai and Pra Walton couldn't help but frown. Someone was following them. This was definitely not good news, because it was impossible for them to be followed by paparazzi. They were neither celebrities nor politicians. Naturally, it was impossible for them to attract professional reporters. The people following them were definitely following them for some reason. They didn't know if these people wanted to kidnap them for their money, or for other reasons. Being followed by others was definitely not good news. How many people are there? Glancing at Azalina, Jiang Hai asked her. Pra Walton also took out his mobile phone and gently pressed a group of numbers. The 2 men in black who had been following in the distance also came over. They were Pra Walton's bodyguards. Naturally, Azalina couldn't be talking about them. There are about 10 people. Looking at them, they don't look like kidnappers, but more like people from the government. Hearing Jiang Hai's words, Azalina frowned. She didn't know why the government was looking for Jiang Hai. Could it be that they wanted the secret of Jiang Hai's forage? This was unlikely. After all, Jiang Hai was no longer in existence that the government could touch. What's more, there was also a global retailer giant, the heir of the Walmart family. It seems that our plans for today's trip have to be temporarily suspended. Looking at Pra Walton in front of him, Jiang Hai said with a smile. After hearing Jiang Hai's words, Pra Walton also shrugged. She didn't care about these things. Then everyone walked in the direction of their car. They walked very fast. This was not the time to pretend. The target has found us. Start moving. Seeing Jiang Hai's group leaving quickly, the people who had been following Jiang Hai in the distance also said something to each other. Then 2 people appeared in front of Jiang Hai and walked directly towards Jiang Hai. But before they could reach them, Pra Walton's 2 bodyguards had one hand on the gun and the other hand signaled the other party to stop. If the other party didn't stop, then they would attack. Don't be impulsive, we are from the CIB. We are here to find Mr. Jiang Hai to understand something. Looking at the movements of the 2 bodyguards in front of them, they didn't think that anything would happen in this busy city, so they immediately said, CIA. Hearing this organization that often appears in movies, Jiang Hai frowned. Even if they want his manor or the secret of the pasture, what does it have to do with the CIB? Does the CIB care about animal husbandry? Let them come over. Thinking of this, Jiang Hai said to the 2 bodyguards in front of him. After the two bodyguards heard Jiang Hai's words, they glanced at Prawalton. Seeing that Prawalton also nodded, they stepped aside and let the two CIB agents come in. After the two walked in, they showed their IDs. Jiang Hai couldn't see what was written on them, but he could see that the photos were indeed of these two people. Jiang Hai's brows also frowned. If you are from the Federation, then I don't understand. Why are you following us? If you have something to say, just come and talk openly. Seeing the two put away their things, Jiang Hai also said seriously. Oh, this is also a habit of ours. Sorry, this time we came to you mainly because of a matter in California. The two people here know that the two guys in front of them are not people they can afford to provoke. According to the information, Jiang Hai has billions, even tens of billions of assets. Prawalton belongs to the Walmart family. If there is a conflict, it is estimated that the higher-ups will use them as scapegoats. Are you kidding me? How can it be so easy to find trouble with Jiang Hai? California? Hearing his words, Jiang Hai frowned. He didn't know what this person was referring to. Was he referring to the gold mine or the lunatic asylum? Now it seems that these two things are quite troublesome. Well, California, to be exact, it is related to one person, Bruce David. Looking at Jiang Hai's eyes, the two people here exchanged a look. One of them looked at Jiang Hai and said with a serious face. Hearing his words, Jiang Hai's face did not change, but his heart thumped. If it is about Bruce David, Jiang Hai is very sure that it should be related to the Antarctic project. Thinking of this, Jiang Hai couldn't help but blame himself. If he went to Antarctica immediately after knowing about the Antarctic project, maybe he would have come back by now. Now the UA authorities are here, then this matter is really not easy to deal with. Chapter 922. If there's anything, remember to call me. Outside the door of Jiang Hai's hotel, Prawalton said to Jiang Hai with a serious face. As she said just now, although the two were not boyfriend and girlfriend, they were more intimate than ordinary boyfriend and girlfriend. Prawalton was where she was today because of Jiang Hai, so whether it was for public or private reasons, she would definitely not let Jiang Hai have an accident. Don't worry, I'm not a pushover. These people can't deal with me. In front of the three people in front of him, Jiang Hai chuckled, and then said very indifferently. Hearing what Jiang Hai said, the three people here could not help but smile awkwardly. As for whether or not he would secretly curse Jiang Hai, this rich man, in his heart, he didn't know. Okay, I understand. Be careful. After hearing Jiang Hai's words, Prawalton also smiled and then left with her bodyguard. As for Jiang Hai, after glancing at the three people around him, he made a gesture of invitation. In fact, just now, when Jiang Hai was called Bruce David by them, he knew where he was wrong. It was this person's fault. Although this guy was crazy, after Jiang Hai asked him about Antarctica, he did not kill him but left directly. In his view, since he had achieved his goal, there was no need to kill more. However, he forgot that whatever Bruce David said to him, he would also tell others the same thing. This mistake exposed him to the eyes of these people. At that moment, he really panicked a little. But then, he secretly scolded himself. What's there to panic about? What's there to panic about? Do you think this is China? Whatever secrets there were, whatever the government said was the truth. This was America, and he was in the privileged class. If he didn't say anything, what could these people do to him? And on the other hand, he might be able to get some information from these people. After all, Bruce David's information was decades ago, and he was crazy. Some details could not be remembered clearly, but the United States must have specific operations and information. If he could get these, it would save him a lot of trouble. Therefore, he directly called the people who could make the decision and returned to the hotel with them. After entering the room, Azalina and Huali Shelley stood behind Jiang Hai, one on the left and one on the right. Jiang Hai sat directly in the middle of the sofa, looking at the three people in front of him. He didn't give them a seat, nor did he give them a drink. Fortunately, these people did not care about Jiang Hai's attitude. Two of his men deliberately brought a chair over and gave it to their leader to sit. Their leader had already introduced himself when he arrived. His name was Louis Quezada, and he was the deputy director of the operations department. The main leader of the Central Intelligence Agency was naturally the director, who was also the director of the Central Intelligence Agency. He was responsible for the activities of the entire United States intelligence community. In addition, there were 4 main departments, each headed by a deputy director. The Management Department, the Operations Department, the Science and Technology Department, and the Intelligence Department were the 4 main forces. Louis Quezada was the Deputy Director of the Operations Department, and he should be ranked in the top 20 in the Central Intelligence Agency. Looking at Jiang Hai, Louis Quezada said with a serious face, "Mr. Jiang, let's not beat around the bush. I'll ask you directly. You can answer seriously if you don't want to. Why are you asking about the Antarctic project?" But unfortunately, after listening to his words, Jiang Hai did not say anything. He just looked at him with a smile. "Ahem, Mr. Jiang, please answer directly." Seeing that Jiang Hai did not speak, Louis Quezada was stunned for a moment, then he looked at Jiang Hai seriously. But Jiang Hai still did not speak. Looking at his anxious face, after a long while, Jiang Hai put down his hand and looked at Louis Quezada in front of him with a funny face. "I think you're mistaken about one thing. I'm not your prisoner. What are you doing here? If you want to interrogate a prisoner, the door is over there. Please close the door for me when you go out. When you come back again, bring the arrest warrant, and then I will inform my lawyer." Looking at Louis Quezada, Jiang Hai said with a serious face. When the man heard Jiang Hai's words, he couldn't help but choke. "Ahem, of course, I'm just here to interrogate." After hearing what Jiang Hai said, Louis Quezada hesitated for a moment and said with a slightly embarrassed expression. "Arrest warrant? Don't joke around. In the United States, it is not easy to apply for an arrest warrant against an ordinary person. It requires solid evidence, and you want to arrest a billionaire? Have you not woken up yet?" It was said that this was a gold-based world. Jiang Hai now had money, fame, and influence. The CIB and Google are in a cooperative relationship. The two are equal, and Jiang Hai is the 11th natural shareholder of Google. You want to arrest Jiang Hai? If something happened, it would be fine. If nothing happened, even if he was arrested, it would not be enough to appease the anger of the higher-ups. So in the face of Jiang Hai's questioning, he had to soften his tone. "You have to act like you're asking. You're begging me, not the other way around. Do you understand? Tone determines everything." Directly interrupting Louis Quezada's words, Jiang Hai pointed at him and said bluntly. After taking a deep breath, Louis Quezada calmed himself down and put a smile on his face again. "Then, Mr. Jiang, please tell me, are you interested in the Antarctic project?" Looking at Jiang Hai, he almost gritted his teeth and said the above paragraph. Such a rich person, such a privileged class, is really annoying. Yes, I am interested in the Antarctic project. Looking at Louis Quezada, Jiang Hai also spoke bluntly. "Oh? What is your purpose?" Hearing Jiang Hai admit it, Louis Quezada's eyes lit up. "No purpose, I'm just interested in these things. Is there a Nazi base in Antarctica, the Triangle of Death, pyramids, dinosaurs, and so on? I'm interested in all of them. The first thing I did when I came to the United States was to visit the Dinosaur Museum." But unfortunately, his eyes were destined to be meaningless, because Jiang Hai's next words made him choke on his own saliva. Mr. Jiang really likes to joke." When he heard Jiang Hai's words, he couldn't help but smile awkwardly, and his face was a little ugly. "Once, I went to Boston with Paul Pierce, the NBA star, and they went to play. In a nightclub, we saw a bartender. She told me some things about this thing, and she also told me that Bruce David told her, so I remembered it. I asked my people to check it out and found that he was crazy. Later, when I went to Los Angeles, I wanted to ask him, and then you know what happened. Looking at Luis Quezada's eyes in front of him, Jiang Hai said with 90% truth and 10% lies. He didn't lie. Almost 95% of the attacks in this book were true. It's just that he didn't say his ultimate goal. This is something he absolutely can't say. Ahem, is it really just like that? Listening to Jiang Hai's words, Luis Quezada's eyes flashed with a trace of doubt. He still didn't believe Jiang Hai. It was difficult to be like Jiang Hai and bravely break into a mental hospital with just one interest. However, Jiang Hai's words were more rigorous, because there were many things that could be found through investigation. For example, the time when Jiang Hai saw the book, Paul Pierce, and the bartender. As long as they wanted to find these things, they could find them. If they could really find these things, it proved that Jiang Hai wasn't lying, or there was a secret that he knew but they didn't. Luis Quezada had to admit that this person's brain was really good, but he couldn't figure out what it was even after racking his brains. You can think whatever you want, but to be honest, it's useless for me to look for it myself. If you can give me some information, then maybe I'll give up. Of course, I won't give it for free. I heard that the treatment of our government isn't very good. I still have some money that I can donate. Looking at this person, Jiang Hai said with a smile. In fact, secrets were not too valuable for the United States. They had many secrets. Some of them were from some of the top families. Whatever the United States military knew, they knew. Therefore, secrets were not a big deal for them. As long as they were not leaked to civilians, it didn't matter. As for Jiang Hai, his identity was indeed a bit special because his information stated that he had helped Wuxia and Dubai, so they really didn't know what his relationship with Wuxia was. It was impossible to trust Jiang Hai so much, but it didn't seem to be in their interests to keep suspecting him. Well, I'll go back and ask for instructions. If there's nothing else, then you can rest first. Seeing that Jiang Hai seemed to be only interested in this thing, Luis Quezada also stood up. Since he couldn't force him and couldn't get anything out of him, he was ready to leave. This matter was definitely not as simple as it seemed, and they needed to learn from it. Please. Hearing his words, Jiang Hai also smiled, indicating that he could leave. Boss, it's my fault for being useless. I haven't found the specific situation yet. After the three people left, Azalina and Wuxia took the detector and walked around the room. After throwing 5 bugs, Wuxia weakly fell into Jiang Hai's arms and said helplessly. Chapter 923. Don't say that. After all, you're just one person. You can't be compared to a country or a force. Looking at Wuxia in his arms, Jiang Hai put his chin on her shoulder, gently rubbing her face while speaking to her. Hearing Jiang Hai's words, Wuxia was very moved. She then turned around and sat on Jiang Hai's lap. Their eyes met, and Wallace took the initiative to offer her own sweet kiss. As Jiang Hai and Wuxia chased each other, the two felt the atmosphere in the room gradually rising. When Jiang Hai's 2 hands reached into some indescribable place, Wuxia couldn't help but snort softly. Here, it seems to have changed again. Jiang Hai said with a smile, feeling as if his 2 hands were about to be unable to wrap around her. Do you like it? This is your baby. I'm also yours. Everything I have is yours. Listening to Jiang Hai's words, feeling the warmth of his hands, Wuxia said softly. Hearing what she said, Jiang Hai didn't have to be polite. As Jiang Hai turned over, the battle began. Azalina, who was just next to him, didn't retreat this time, but joined the battle with Jiang Hai. When it came to fighting ability, 10 Wuxias couldn't compare to Azalina, but when it came to teasing Jiang Hai, 10 Azalinas couldn't compare to Wuxia. Azalina just followed whatever Jiang Hai said. Whatever position Jiang Hai said, that's what she said, that's what she said, that's where she went, that's where she went. A pair of nearly 1.2 long legs, strong and slender, wrapped around Jiang Hai's waist. The feeling was quite good, but after all, it was a bit of back movement. But Wallace Shelley didn't need Jiang Hai to tell her to do all the positions on her own, constantly stimulating Jiang Hai's senses. For example, when Jiang Hai and Azalina were fighting, she would step over Azalina's body, allowing Jiang Hai to clearly see two indescribable entrances and exits, and then with Azalina. Cough, it's not good to say too much. Anyway, Wallace Shelley was really talented in this regard, and Jiang Hai liked her very much. Jiang Hai and Wallace Shelley didn't finish fighting until before dinner. After a rest, they went downstairs to the Western restaurant, where Pra Walton had been waiting for a long time. When they arrived, Pra Walton looked at Jiang Hai, Azalina, and Wallace Shelley with a faint smile, clearly saying that he knew what they were doing. But Jiang Hai was very thick-skinned, and the two didn't care about other people's gazes. If it were Chia or Ai Xiaoxi, they might have blushed, but the two just watched Jiang Hai go to Pra Walton's table, and then they opened a table and sat down. After everyone sat down, the dishes began to be served. Jiang Hai and Pra Walton ate Western food. Of course, this hotel didn't have Jiang Hai's steak and seafood. When the dishes were served, Westerners didn't like to talk, so Jiang Hai and the others just ate quietly there. After eating, when they began to eat desserts and drinks, Pra Walton looked at Jiang Hai and said, "Your two bodyguards are multifunctional." Looking at Jiang Hai, Pra Walton said with a playful face, "You don't accompany me, I naturally need to solve it." Hearing Pra Walton's words, Jiang Hai also said with a smile, "Come to my home in Atlantic City, I will accompany you every day. There are plenty of women, however many you want, I will find you as many as you want." Rolling her eyes at Jiang Hai, Pra Walton said with a look of disdain, "You must know that she has girlfriends all over the world." Perhaps this sentence is not wrong. If Jiang Hai really goes, there will be as many as he wants, provided that how many can he deal with? Hee, I'm not going. With a smile, Jiang Hai remembered that when he went to Atlantic City, he almost didn't have time to rest. Although there were many women in his home, he was the one who took the initiative. When he went to Pra Walton's place, there were women who wanted to have some unspeakable battle with him at any time. Originally, Jiang Hai refused in his heart, but everyone knows that a dragon's nature is not so easy to extinguish once he is interested, so Jiang Hai can only laugh at this. His physical fitness is 8 times that of ordinary people, so he can't bear it. "I'm going to sleep at your place tonight. I'm also very interested in them." Seeing that Jiang Hai was silent, Pra Walton glanced at Azalina and Wallace Shelley in the distance, gently licked the spoon in her hand, and said to Jiang Hai, They are roses with thorns, be careful not to prick your hands." Hearing Pra Walton's words, Jiang Hai couldn't help but say to her, "TSK, little stingy, don't be so clear with me. Forget it, you can sleep at my place tonight. I'm much more generous than you. I also found some entertainment for you." Hearing Jiang Hai's words, Pra Walton couldn't help but wrinkle her nose. When she heard Jiang Hai say this, how could she not understand? Jiang Hai doesn't want me to have any relationship with them beyond friendship. This man is really stingy. I'm already his, but he still has to guard against me. But it doesn't matter. Tonight, she found someone else to play with her. Of course, this someone else is also a woman. "Mr. Jiang, we meet again." Just as Jiang Hai and Pra Walton were talking here, a voice suddenly came from a distance. Jiang Hai and the others looked back and found that a middle-aged man had been stopped outside by Pra Walton's 2 bodyguards. Seeing this man, Jiang Hai couldn't help but slap his forehead. He regretted not going back. Because this guy was none other than that crazy bastard from today, Terry Boggs. He would never have thought that Terry would chase him all the way here. Hadn't he already told Terry and the leader of his party that he wasn't interested in them? Terry Boggs, how do you know him? Looking at the man in the distance, Pra Walton also frowned and whispered to Jiang Hai. As a businessman, the most important thing was to learn to pick sides. Especially for big families, they had to learn not to put all their eggs in one basket. This was also very common in ancient Wuxia. For example, the famous Zhuge family. The eldest Zhuge Jin was from Wu Kingdom, the second brother Zhuge Liang was from Shu Han, and they had a younger brother named Zhuge Sang, who was from Cao Cao. In fact, the one who was supposed to go to Cao Cao's place was their third brother Zhuge Jun, but because Zhuge Liang was too dazzling in Shu Han, they sent his younger brother. In this way, no matter which country eventually unified the world, the Zhuge family would prosper forever. This was also the essence of picking sides. However, no one would have thought that in the end, the three countries would belong to Jin, so this was a failed political investment. But it was definitely not wrong to do so. The Walton family has never been involved in politics. But they will also make some political investments. They don't ask for merit, but they don't want to make mistakes. After the new government comes to power, as long as their brain is not damaged, they will not do anything to the world's largest retailer. This is also a realistic problem. So now that he saw that Jiang Hai was so familiar with the people of the Liberal Party, Pra Walton was also a little surprised. Today, I had a meal with him in the meeting. I don't know what kind of Liberal Party he is. Looking at Pra Walton speechlessly, Jiang Hai whispered in a low voice. In fact, Jiang Hai can't be blamed, nor can Moses Adams and Wallace Shelley be blamed. They don't know what this person does. After all, Jiang Hai doesn't mix in this circle. Otherwise, if someone mentioned that this person is a member of the Liberal Party, Jiang Hai would not have eaten with him. That's troublesome. The Liberal Party is famous for being unreasonable. Pra Walton raised an eyebrow and said helplessly. Okay, I know, I will get rid of him as soon as possible. You go back first. After all, you are now representing the Walton family. If you are photographed with him, it will be troublesome. You go back to the room and wait for me. Looking at Pra Walton's worried face, she was willing to stay and face it with Jiang Hai, but Jiang Hai knew how important Sam's Club was to Pra Walton, so he did not let Pra Walton accompany him here, but spoke directly to her. After hearing Jiang Hai's words, Pra Walton hesitated for a moment. After seeing Jiang Hai's confident look, she made a gesture of waiting for him and then left. Seeing Pra Walton leave, the two bodyguards on the other side also left. Seeing that no one was stopping him, Terry Boggs also walked over quickly with a smile and sat opposite Jiang Hai, which was Pra Walton's seat. Seeing him sit down, Jiang Hai was also a little speechless. Mr. Terry Boggs, I'll be frank. I have no interest in the Liberal Party. To be exact, I have no interest in any political party. I'm a Chinese in the United States. My identity is sensitive enough. Therefore, I won't touch these things. I'm not a gambler. Therefore, even if there's only a 1 in 100 million chance of failure, I won't have any relationship with any political party. I think I've made myself clear, haven't I? Looking at Terry Boggs in front of him, Jiang Hai did not wait for him to speak first and spoke first. Wow, it's really a pity that you think so, but this time I came not only to persuade you to join the Liberal Party, but I also heard something. Maybe we have a chance to cooperate? Chapter 924. Cooperation? Oh, I don't think there's anything we can cooperate on. Looking at the person in front of him, Jiang Hai leaned back on the chair gently and said with some doubts. Indeed, in Jiang Hai's opinion, there is no possibility of cooperation between him and the Nature Party. He won't sell his pasture to the Liberal Party, and he won't cooperate with the Liberal Party. Whether it's selling beef, raising cattle, raising fish, or developing Winthrop, no matter what, Jiang Hai won't cooperate with them. He didn't think that these people had anything to give him, and he wouldn't invest in them either. Just like he said, even if there was only a 1 in a billion chance of losing everything, he definitely wouldn't cooperate with these people. That was the truth. Don't talk to Jiang Hai about tomorrow, the future, dreams, and the like. He doesn't believe in these, he only believes in himself today. He was quite satisfied with his current life. It was impossible for him to take risks and gamble his current life on it. Therefore, Jiang Hai is not a gambler, nor is he a qualified businessman. He isn't prepared to spend any time on this. If he has more time, he is willing to stay on his recliner, watch the wind in summer, and watch the snow in winter. No matter how boring it is, he likes this kind of life. He doesn't like to take risks, start a company, or struggle. He is just a pile of mud, he just can't support the wall. He has accepted his fate, so words are useless to him. Really? I thought you would be interested in this thing. Hearing Jiang Hai's decisive words, Terry Boggs smiled, took out a few pieces of paper from his pocket, and handed it to Jiang Hai. Jiang Hai wasn't afraid of him playing tricks. So he directly took the paper, opened it, and looked at it. There were a few words on it. It was descending from the sky. Seeing these words, Jiang Hai's eyes couldn't help but focus, because no one is more familiar with what these words mean than him. It seems that this person from the Liberal Party is really powerful. He actually knew what he was looking for. Are you interested now? Looking at Jiang Hai, Terry Boggs smiled and said, "Tell me about it." Glancing at these few pieces of paper, there are only some excerpts on it. The paper should be photocopied from the official records of the descending from the sky, but the things on it are very incomplete. Except for the beginning, there is a paragraph in the middle with no content. The real content isn't here, so Jiang Hai asked. "We want to cooperate with you. Since you don't want to join the party, then can you disclose your forage formula?" Seeing that Jiang Hai agreed to talk, Terry Boggs smiled and said, his face full of confidence, "Put it away." But before he finished speaking, Jiang Hai stood up, threw the paper in front of him, and then prepared to leave. Seeing Jiang Hai refuse him so straightforwardly, Terry Boggs became a little anxious. This was because at noon, he had seen some of Jiang Hai's methods. If it was a businessman in front of him, then he wouldn't be in a hurry. This was because businessmen were used to playing hard to get. But Jiang Hai is not a businessman. After he threw the paper back today, he might not be able to see him again. "Hey, Jiang, let's talk. There will always be a back and forth, right?" Seeing that Jiang Hai was about to leave, Terry Boggs also stood up, then said to Jiang Hai with a helpless face, "But you don't have any sincerity at all. If you want to sell this information, how much? Name a price. It's impossible for me to give you anything else." Hearing his words, Jiang Hai waved his hand, distributing the formula of the forage. He was really thinking too much. "Hey, Jiang, we are the third political party. We don't lack money. Well, in fact, we don't lack your money, we just lack people with influence. If you join our political party, then I will give you all this information." Seeing that Jiang Hai had no desire to talk, Terry Boggs said with a serious face, "Sorry, I have no interest in joining any political party. If you are willing to sell, $100 million, if not, forget it. I know you don't have the power to make the decision. Go back and ask the people behind you who can make the decision." Glancing at the person behind him, Jiang Hai said indifferently, then waved his hand and went upstairs with Azalina and Wallace Shelley. Looking at Jiang Hai's departure, Terry Boggs couldn't help but frown. This was too troublesome. The Liberal Party was eyeing Jiang Hai for two reasons. First, it was because of Jiang Hai's pasture. If they had the support of Jiang Hai's pasture, then they would be able to get the support of the farmers in the less wealthy states in the central region of the United States. It must be known that the current president came to power through the support of these people. Secondly, it was Jiang Hai's influence in Massachusetts. Massachusetts had a total of 12 votes in the U.S. election, and it had always been the Republican Party's base. However, if Jiang Hai joined the Liberal Party, then it would be hard to say. With Jiang Hai's influence, they would have a lot more votes, but at least they could get 4 or more votes in Massachusetts. This was Jiang Hai's ability. But now, Jiang Hai had no interest in their party at all. To be honest, Terry Boggs wanted to burn him to death. From a certain point of view, factions and religions were the same. If you don't believe me, then you are a heretic and you deserve to die. This was the reality of the situation. However, Jiang Hai had no one to kill him. It was that simple. After leaving the restaurant, Jiang Hai went to Pro Walton's room. Of course, no one knew what happened in the room that night, but the scene in the restaurant was seen by many people and forces. This guy is really interested in the aerial landing plan. Less than 10 minutes after the incident, in the CIB building, Louis Quezada, who Jiang Hai had met today, gently tapped the table in front of him with his finger. He had long known that Jiang Hai did not tell him the truth, and now he was even more certain. Although Jiang Hai did not join the Republican Party, nor did he disclose the biggest secret, Jiang Hai's last words were thought-provoking. $100 million for this information. If this information was not of great use to Jiang Hai, he would not believe it no matter what. That was $100 million, not 100 million Zimbabwe dollars. He would not be able to earn $100 million in 10 lifetimes. Although $100 million was nothing to Jiang Hai, given his character, he would not throw it out so easily. He had investigated Jiang Hai's situation. This guy was basically a stingy nouveau riche, although he had a lot of money. But he did not care much about enjoying life, nor did he care much about debauchery and the like. He wasn't like those rich young people who sought thrills all day long and lived in a drunken stupor. Although he wasn't particularly stingy, he definitely wasn't as extravagant as those rich people. For such a person to spend $100 million on something useless, regardless of whether others believed it or not, he didn't believe it. Under such circumstances, there was only one possibility. That was, this thing was really important to him. But as for how important it was, he would have to give it a try. At this time, Jiang Hai did not know any of this. After leaving the restaurant, he returned to Pra Walton's room. When he came back, in addition to Pra Walton, there was another beautiful woman in the room. Jiang Hai did not know her, nor did he know who she was. She did not know who Jiang Hai was, but they did not need to know each other. After all, it was not the first time Pra Walton had done something like this. She then took the initiative to kiss Jiang Hai's mouth, and then took off the beautiful woman's clothes in front of her. As she hugged her, she let Jiang Hai's hand cover her private parts. Sometimes, war was like this. Jiang Hai wanted to say a few more words, but he did not even have time to chat before it began. The night was silent. In fact, there was indeed no sound. Only some emotional words echoed in the room. Around 10 o'clock the next morning, when Jiang Hai got up, the beautiful woman from last night was gone. Only Pra Walton was lying next to him, playing with her mobile phone. Looking at her appearance, Jiang Hai pulled her into his arms and continued to sleep. Pra Walton looked at Jiang Hai's appearance and chuckled. When the two got up, it was almost lunch. But today, Pra Walton could not accompany Jiang Hai because she also had to attend a summit today. Jiang Hai also returned to his room. After having lunch with Azalina and Wallace Shelley, he was not going to go out. Winter in Washington was also very cold. So he would rather stay in the room with the heater on than go out and suffer the cold. But today, he was destined to be busy because he was just about to take a nap after lunch when a familiar face appeared in front of his door. Looking at Louis Quezada outside the door, Azalina stopped them while looking in Jiang Hai's direction. She signaled with her eyes whether to let them in or directly drive them away. What? Did you apply for an arrest warrant? Looking at the people outside the door, Jiang Hai smiled and said to them. They were really haunting him. Of course not. But speaking of which, we're here this time to discuss a deal with Mr. Jiang. This is what we're using. Looking at Jiang Hai, Louis Quezada smiled and shook his head, then took out a stack of reports. You're tuning in to the Biyao's Wuxia Chronicles YouTube channel. Don't forget to subscribe and join us on this journey to catch the most captivating stories.